And we're good to go.
All right, good evening. I'd like to call to order the April 29th, 2020 regular board meeting of the Methacton School District Board of Directors. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
The Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hi, I'm Dylan Becker. First, I would like to thank you for honoring me as a junior board member. As a fourth grader, there are many things that I love about Eagleville. One memory that I remember was when I was eating lunch. I wanted to have a second walking taco. The lunch lady not only gave me another one, but she asked me what type of Doritos I wanted. Just those little things that people at Eagleville do really touch my heart. I'm very thankful to be a student at Eagleville. Everyone there has cared for me since I was in kindergarten and now all the way to fourth grade. It's been a wonderful 5 years at Eagleville. Thank you.
So, Ms. President, we will send certificates to Abby and Dylan, our two junior board members from Eagleville Elementary School for April of 2020.
Wonderful. Wish we could have seen them in person, but I'm glad they were able to participate. So the public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. Given the need to conduct the school board meeting in a virtual environment, the Board of Directors required that members of the public wanting to make comments on agenda items or at courtesy of the floor pre-register by 5 o'clock today. By way of attendance, we're going to do a roll call for attendance, I'm sorry. Ms. Cancro?
Here, sorry.
Ms. Drummond?
Here.
Ms. Hull?
Here.
Mr. McGinnis?
Here.
Mr. Neverett?
Here.
Ms. Purdue?
Here.
Ms. Reese?
Here.
Mr. Winters?
Here.
And myself. The recognitions of guests and scheduled speakers, I turn back to Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Ms. President. This evening we have with us Dr. Kelly Harmer, Principal, Eagleville Elementary School. Dr. Harmer has the pleasure this evening of sharing with us several members of his staff that have received the Award of Excellence for the month of April 2020. So Dr. Harmer, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you, and I'm going to post your document up for view by the public.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Thank you, board members. It is my honor to present to you tonight the Eagleville Elementary Award of Excellence recipients for 2019-2020. Our first recipient
So Dr. Harmer, is it presenting or not? I can't tell.
it's not presenting. It's not moving on to.
That's right. It appeared that way. Just give me a second.
Sure.
Okay, now continue.
Thank you. Our first recipient is Principal Secretary Michelle Vitelli. Over the course of my first year at Eagleville, Michelle Vitelli has proved to be an invaluable resource for me to tap into on a daily basis. While Michelle is also new to her position as secretary to the principal, she continually amazes me with her passion and energy that she puts into the job. On a regular basis, Michelle has the information ready many times before I even ask for it. She presents all that enter the Eagleville office with a warm smile and friendly greeting. Teachers, parents, our home and school and students know Michelle will be there for them at a moment's notice to support and provide assistance. What strikes me special about Michelle is her connection to the students. Michelle knows them all by name, and she's able to relate to the students on a personal level. We are thankful for her commitment to excellence, the commitment to excellence that Michelle brings to Eagleville each and every day. Michelle Vitelli is the face of Eagleville for all that come into our office, and I thank her for her commitment to the Eagleville and Methacton community.
Congratulations, Michelle. Next.
Our next recipient is Leslie Venaccio. Leslie not only runs the kitchen at Eagleville Elementary, in many ways, she is the heart of the school also. Leslie makes sure the kitchen is humming every day with efficiency and preparedness. The day starts with breakfast for many of our Eagleville students, and Leslie is there every day with a warm smile and a greeting, making sure all the students head off to class with a full belly. As soon as breakfast wraps up, it's on to preparing lunch for all the students. Leslie makes an effort to develop relationships with the students, and you can tell by the way that they react to her, they know she is in their corner. From warm donuts in the morning to hot lunches later that day, Leslie is always there for the Eagleville students. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Leslie. Next.
Gail Brown welcomes her students to her classroom with a smile. Her classroom exudes warmth, safety, and a love of learning. When you walk in at any time to Gail's classroom, you'll see children engaged, happy, and excited about school. Gail is comfortable taking risks, such as integrating new and exciting technology into her daily lessons. Gail is respected by the teachers, students, and community, and she is involved in so many ways with our Eagleville community. Not only does she present interesting and engaging instruction during the school day, she also heads up the after-school environmental club at Eagleville. The environmental club under Gail's direction is responsible for such great additions to the school like the outside classroom and butterfly garden. Gail is not only a great educator, she is also a respected and trusted role model for our students. Congratulations, Gail.
Congratulations, Gail. Next.
Mr. Moser, or Coach Moser, is a Methacton alumni and well known for his wrestling exploits while attending Methacton High School. To the students of Eagleville, he also goes by Coach Moser or Mr. Moser, but he's more importantly their physical education teacher and a source of weekly exercise and fun. Bull Moser not only believes in physical fitness and education, he also ensures the students believe in it too. Gym class at Eagleville is filled with fun games, coaching, and collaboration. Mr. Moser teaches the students the skills that are important to learn when living a healthy lifestyle, but more importantly, many of these skills can also be used in their classrooms and at home. When visiting the gym at Eagleville, you will be greeted with activity, laughter, music, and perhaps an American Ninja Warrior obstacle course. Mr. Moser also coaches wrestling at the middle school and runs the after-school sports club at Eagleville. We are fortunate that he came back to the Methacton community to pursue an educational and coaching career. Congratulations, Bill.
Congratulations, Bill. Next.
Kristen Evans is a fixture at Eagleville and someone the students can trust when they interact with her each day. Kristen is much more than a playground aide. She is the ambassador of fun for all our students. While she ensures the children play in a fun and safe manner at recess, she also runs the indoor recess cart, helps out in the cafeteria assisting students, and always makes herself available for the office staff as an extra set of hands. Kristen makes it a point to know the students personally so they feel she is always there when they need help. Kristen from bringing in bouncy balls and sidewalk chalk for the students are just two examples of her generosity towards the students. Kristen will always be the ambassador of fun at Eagleville, and we're thankful for her positive attitude and energy which she brings to school every day. Congratulations, Kristen.
Congratulations, Kristen. And last.
Deb Wittenberg loves to teach, and it's evident that she brings the love of learning to the students in her classroom. Deb builds connections with the students very quickly, and the rapport and trust they show to her is truly remarkable. It seems that if you walk by her classroom at any point of the day, there's an experiment, read aloud, technology lesson, or some other interesting topic being covered. What you're guaranteed to see is Deb Wittenberg interacting with the students to spark their interest in learning. Not only is Deb an exceptional teacher, she is also a teacher leader at Eagleville. Staff trust her advice, including the principal. If there is one shining example of what Deb Wittenberg is about, it would have to be the fact that she truly cares for her students and their lives beyond the walls of Eagleville. The students know this, and that's why they feel respected and cared for in Mrs. Wittenberg's classroom. Congratulations, Deb.
Congratulations, Deb. And Dr. Harmer, this is quite a list of outstanding employees here in Methacton School District. I appreciate you bring them to the board to be recognized. I wish that we just had the opportunity to shake their hands and show our affection and appreciation as we have for many employees in the district each month, as we recognize many of the outstanding efforts that take place every day in all of our schools. So Dr. Harmer, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening. You're welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting, but you're also welcome not to, as you see fit. So thank you so much, and we'll make sure that these certificates have been provided and mailed to our teachers.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for the honor.
Next on the list of guest and scheduled speakers, I have Dr. Katona and Ms. Schmitz for a college and career programming update. I turn the co-hosting over to Dr. Katona, so she'll present the material, and both of them will speak to the board about the great things that we've done in college and career programming.
Everybody can see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So as Dr. Zerbe said, our K-12 career counselor, Mrs. Schmitz, and I are providing an update on our district's progress with college and career readiness. As you know, last year there was a presentation around this, and it was mainly focused on the 339 plan because we needed approval for it. But this year, we've really grown into getting a lot of things into place for our students that they need under Mrs. Schmidt's leadership. So we had previously presented this to the Education Committee, and we're now happy to bring it to the board. So the first two slides are going to be a summary of information on our districts meeting the career benchmarks as reported in the Future Ready PA Index for the past 2 years. I'm going to briefly go over these slides, and then Mrs. Schmitz is going to pick up and talk more about some of the programming and communications that she's been working on with other counselors and with teachers this year. So this slide shows you from the 2019 Future Ready PA Index how our students fared in terms of meeting the career benchmark standards. And again, these are calculated in grades 5, 8, and 11, and they're based on those years and the previous two. Grades 5 and 8 are to have 6 pieces of evidence over that time, and grade 11 is to have 8 pieces of evidence over that time. So you can see that all 3 levels are above the state average of 89.8, and our COLA has already, at least last year, had already surpassed the 2030 goal that the state has of 98% with 98.7, and our 11th graders and 5th graders are right there knocking at the door of that 98% as well. So just to kind of get some perspective on that, and again, what's been happening over the past year, the year before, 2018, you can see these were our totals. We had at the high school, Arcola and Skyview, in comparison with the state goal and in comparison with what we had in 2019. And you can see that all 3 levels increased, most especially, of course, at the high school level, which in 2018 was at 79.4. And this is due in large part, again, to Mrs. Schmitz's leadership in working to gather data and to put the appropriate opportunities in place. And so now I'm going to ask Mrs. Schmitz to go through the next several slides.
All right, hello. Well, let's take a look at the 3 focus areas of the College and Career Readiness Program for this year. So focus area 1. Facilitating mentorships and encouraging students to take part in work-based learning continues to be a focus. It is important to increase student awareness and engagement, connect with career mentors, and ensure that the goals and activities of the 339 plan support the objectives of career readiness. Focus Area 2, emphasis on regular communication with parents through home and school meetings, presentations such as the post-secondary planning night, and publishing Career Spotlight remain a focus. Parent access to Naviance is initiated, and our technology department continues to work with Naviance to make this happen. Focus Area 3, this year we have 7 staff attending Teacher in the Workplace. There are 5 days of experiential learning, which conclude in June, and we have been meeting as a team after each visit to debrief and reflect on the experience and connection to the classroom. Other opportunities have been the Dow Educator Excursion and a day in the life at North Modco. I've also been inviting additional teachers to accompany us on field trips for further exposure to the workplace. I have received positive feedback and enthusiasm about integrating career readiness into the classroom from the teachers that were included in this program. To address our focus areas, we're growing possible experiences for students. So let's take a look at these opportunities. You can see there are many activities that were not available 3 years ago. These field trips and events expose students to new career-based experiences, helping them be better informed of career pathways and post-secondary options. Due to school closure, some things have changed. Although end-of-the-year field trips, career speakers, and career days were canceled, they will continue to be a focus for the future. New activities added in 2019-20, such as field trips to the Healthcare Expo, the Construction Fair, were well attended, and the GSK Visiting Students Day enlightened participants about STEM careers. A Career and Community Services Fair was scheduled for March, and First Quality, a field trip to expose students to automation and robotics in manufacturing, was put on hold till next year. Here are a few student reflections to give you insight into what they have been learning. Our first one comes from the Healthcare Expo. My experience strengthened my thoughts about a possible future career. Seeing all of the stations at the expo made me see that health is something I would like to study in the future. There were many cool exhibits that I saw that made me see how many different things there are to do when studying health. This reflection came from the Futures Expo, which was a 9th grade expo focusing on entrepreneurship, work skills such as interviewing and getting a job, and financial literacy. I learned different skills needed for a real-life job. For example, I learned how to interview, save my money properly, and interact with people. And from the Digital Girls, which was a technology day for girls at Pfizer, the field trip positively impacted my career path by exposing me to different aspects of computer science and introducing real students that have jobs in computer science lined up after they graduate. Also from the Futures Expo, I don't know what my career path will be like yet, but the classroom speakers really helped to set me up for how to get a job and what it could be in the future. From the Career Journey, which is a first week activity within the classroom, I learned to find your passion and let that lead you to your job. Don't have tunnel vision and jump from point A to point B. There are so many opportunities you could miss. And this from a student who had a classroom speaker on interviewing. I learned that you need to be confident in what you want to do and be respectful, presentable, and ready for whatever comes in your direction. So I hope that gives you an idea of the learning that is taking place from the many of these opportunities. And there's so much more that the students have shared. The Chapter 339 plan included the development of the Advisory Council to meet twice a year. In addition to representation from our administration, school board, teachers, counselors, parents, and students, Here are the businesses, colleges, and organizations that are providing support for our efforts as members of the Advisory Council. Our members assist us sustaining our current opportunities while exploring future possibilities. Our future focus is on increasing student engagement with the workplace, analyzing how work-based learning aligns with curriculum, and determining means to promote awareness of opportunities to students and parents. The next meeting of the council was scheduled to be held in May at Globus Medical, a local manufacturing company, to better connect with the business community, increase awareness, and educate our advisory members.
Judy, you muted.
And better prepare and educate our advisory members as they guide college and career readiness in Methacton. As we look ahead, here are the next steps for college and career readiness. Expand career awareness through participation in activities, industry speakers, and field trips. Many students are hesitant to miss class for these events, so we'll be looking into virtual field trips and speakers, which now is nothing new. Career cafes, which are lunchtime career speakers, have been successful at Skyview and will be introduced at Arcola. It is important to grow the mentorship program and work-based learning. This may include job shadow opportunities, increase mentorships, build on the existing pre-career program, and advertise for businesses to serve as career mentors. Provide opportunities for current teachers to share teacher in the workplace experience with their peers to encourage and increase involvement. Create opportunities for developing essential skills needed for the workplace, utilizing the PA Career Ready Skills Continuum. Conduct annual counselor review to ensure goals and activities included in Chapter 339 are meeting the objectives of career readiness for all students. So this is where we are headed, and this completes the presentation. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Ms. Schmitz, thank you so much for the presentation. Before we take comments or questions from members of the board, I think it's certainly appropriate. While the board has not yet acted on your intent to retire, please know that, as I do, they should know that you started our career awareness program, and you started it from the ground level. All the things that we have today as a result of the hard work that you put forward and the vision that you had. And I'm so proud of the work that you've done. I'm certainly proud of the work that you've done with Dr. Cotona and other counselors across the district and teachers across the district. So it's been a pleasure, and it certainly has been well worth the opportunities that you put forward for all of our students here in the district. And I'm just thankful for all that you've done. So we appreciate all that you've done for us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Questions, comments from members of the board?
Ms. Schmitz, it's Andrea Reese. Thank you for your presentation, and Dr. Zerbe said a lot of the things I wanted to say, but I know we've discussed at education meetings quite often your role and how you had to, you started this for Methacton with not limited, but with only a few others in Montgomery County doing this. So you really worked from the ground up. Do you have any advice for us on a transition for you leaving, like meaning a timeline you suggest? I don't need to know the nitty gritty, but anything that you suggest for us. Sorry to put you on the spot because this isn't about your presentation, but while I've got you.
Well, I have a lot of things. Obviously, I want this program to succeed. So the biggest advice is to keep it rolling, keep it going, and not lose ground or time. And certainly the things that I have, the ideas I have, will be passed on to the next person. But the support the board has shown for this program, I think the support for the position I had to really allow me to be out in the community, which is where I needed to be, to make those connections, that continuing that support is just invaluable.
Any other questions for Ms. Schmitz?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Judy, that serving on the Career Readiness Council with you, I just want to acknowledge of our community, business leaders, potential employers, area experts, and educational institutions. And the result is a robust network of resources for our students that they have available to them. And I'm grateful I had the opportunity to work with you, and I wish you all the very best in your retirement.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't expect this to happen on the same night. I was a little hesitant about this. I thought, oh no, but thank you again for your support. It's been wonderful.
Any other comments? Mr. Navarrete?
Hey, Judy, I'll pile on. I know we've known each other for a lot of years. I want to thank you for the excellent job that you did to get this program kicked off before anybody else was doing it. You have put us on a wonderful path here. This truly speaks to our strategy about addressing the whole child and putting opportunities in front of our children at a young age, and let them start thinking, let them start being exposed to all the different opportunities that are in front of them that aren't, necessarily going to college, that there are other opportunities out there besides just go to college, get a degree, and go sit in a chair all day like I do. I thank you for what you've done. This district will be will have a hole in it when you leave.
Thank you.
Mr. Winters?
Yeah, thank you also, Mrs. Schmitz. Just one quick question have you considered any curriculum changes for maybe an elective in the high school that would be like 21st century skill sets, or some other actual sort of hard defined time associated with this to sort of give, I believe it would have benefit and have interest among many students, no matter in high school or Arco or wherever.
Yeah, and this has been a continuing conversation that will again continue with Dr. Katona, Dr. Sergini. There's a lot to look at, but certainly that is something that will be, my thoughts on that will be passed on as well. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from Ms. Schmitz? If not, again, Dr. Katona, thank you so much for the presentation, and Ms. Schmitz, thank you for all that you've done for the district. I'm certain that if the board decides to approve your resignation this evening, that we'll be recognizing you again later with other retirees. So we got one more opportunity to say thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Have a great evening.
You too.
Next on the agenda, we have the 18-19 surplus review combined with the 19-20 end of year forecast and the budget update for 2021. Mr. Bricker is with us this evening. He is going to take over the screen and the microphone. Please know that while we're presenting on three things as recommended by the Finance Committee, these three things are interrelated, as all of you know, and as a result, he has set up the presentation so where he can stop at each segment and take some questions. So we'll have a number of spots for the board to ask any questions of him as we move forward with this. Mr. Bricker, microphone is yours.
I'm saying I'm disabled. I cannot share my screen.
Did that help?
Yes, it did. Thank you. All right. Thank you. As Dr. Zerby showed or spoke, we're going to go over the surplus for 2018-2019, the forecast for 2019-2020, and the 2020-2021 budget as of the April update. As you can see from this slide, the surplus was composed of two different pieces. Revenue, there was an additional revenue of $673,000 and underspending of $1.1 million. That gave us a combined surplus of $1.8 million. Local revenue was above budget by $793,000 and was $800,000. This was at real estate taxes were taxed at 99.94% of projection. Interest income was $408,000 roughly above budget, which made up 51% of the surplus. This was due to the fact that interest rates were increasing, and we were able to invest our money in higher yielding rates than projected. The 2019-2020 budget was increased by $512,000 roughly to account for this increasing interest rate, and to continue the increasing deposits that we have in these higher yielding depositories. State revenue was $83,000 below budget. Subsidies were $538,000 higher than budgeted, but the transportation subsidy accounted for $325,000 or 61% of the subsidy variances due to the timing of the completion of the state budget. What we do is we budget for the current years or prior years amounts, because the state budget's obviously approved after our budget is done, typically. Social Security and PEASers were below budget by a combined $618,000. These areas were below budget due to the changes in staffing, resignations, replacements, and unfilled positions. Federal revenue was $37,544, roughly below budget. Total funding came in at $25,515.15 below requested funding. Anticipated funding for the 2019-2020 year was reduced by $80,130 due to the projected funding. Total revenue surplus was $673,000. Excluding the changes in real estate taxes, the 2019-2020 budget included increased revenue of $1.4 million roughly. There was a $950,000 increase in local revenue, which is driven predominantly by the interest income adjustment. Looking into the expenditures, salaries for the 2018-2019 ended up about $878,000 below budget. We broke this down into the different groups. Administrators were $49,000 below. Confidential/technology was $74,000 above. MESPA was about $250,000 below. This was related to the 6 PCAs that were budgeted for, but due to the certifications required, actually came in the per pupil services budget under professional services. MEA had $340,000 below, and this is delays in the hiring time and ability to find individuals to replace and leaves that occur. Teamsters were $287.09 below. This is lower. Was due to lower than anticipated overtime due to the lack of snow. Coaches and contracts are $21,000 below, and this is changes in experience, postseason pay, and other related items with contractual obligations. Expenses were driven down by contractual obligations. The positions that are budgeted are by when we budget for a new staff member for an open position or a bachelor's plus 15, step 3 for MEA, unless the position is specialized. All other positions are based on the contractual requirements. Coaches' pay, including the postseason costs, are also factored into the budget. Supplemental contracts, including department subject coordinators, mentors, sponsors, and ISSs. The budget changes in 2019-2020 based on the 2018-2019 final surplus. We reduced the personnel budget by almost $654,000 into substitute costs. We're intended to use the budgetary transfer to address the costs as these positions are not filled. So when an individual is not hired or they go on leave, we replace that individual with a substitute teacher. Therefore, we would then transfer those amounts that were budgeted for that individual over to the substitutes. Overtime was also reduced in the budget for Teamsters. As I also mentioned previously, the PCAs removed the people services where the actual costs occurred. With regards to benefits, we're $1.6 million below budget. Medical was $366,000 below budget. This is based on staffing changes, anticipated benefits, and for unfulfilled positions. Unemployment was budgeted at $239,000 because we're self-insured and based on actual cost. Tuition reimbursements budgeted at $162,000 below, and prescription came in $73,000 below, again, based on the selections that the staff chooses and any changes that occur throughout the year. Workers' compensation was $65,767 below budget, and we're self-insured also. We budget based on the recommendations of our management company, which is SDIC. Retirement and Social Security also added to this shortfall, or this surplus, excuse me, by about $590,000. Medical, prescription, and vision and dental insurance are based on the choices of the staff and the amounts budgeted for open position. Changes to the selections that occur throughout the year will create surpluses or deficits depending on the changes. Additionally, any position that goes unfilled will have a savings. Tuition amounts are based on MEA and MAO agreements and are budgeted based on contractual amounts agreed upon. Budgets in the 2019-2020 school year based on the surplus, we had unemployment costs budgeted at $100,000, which saved us $139,000. This will continue to be monitored and adjusted annually. Social Security and PSERS are also based on actual staff and open positions. When we look at the operating costs, we overspent by about $385,000. As already noted, the professional services had 6 PCAs and sub-costs that were over the budgeted amounts. We also had professional property services that came in roughly about $37,600 below budget. And that's due to the variability of the cost that we're budgeting for. There was $336,719.80 that we were above, and that directly was attributed to the tuition paid to charter schools and other districts. Supplies were $326,500 roughly below budget. That came from the buildings and departments. And property based on planned equipment that we would capitalize was about $95,000 below budget because of purchases that did not occur. Budget changes in 2019-2020 based on the surplus. We had professional services that were increased due to the outsourced PCAs forecasted. The forecasted increase in PCAs for that 2019-2020 year were not added into the budget because they assumed the former PCA roles that went unfilled. Personnel budget was also reduced as part of the salary cost to be transferred as previously noted. Purchased property services were reduced due to the reduction in the cost associated with the fuel, gas, and other maintenance areas. Other purchase services were increased to cover the cost of shortfalls and increased costs. Supplies were reduced at the building levels to be in line with actual expenses. Property costs were reduced by $25,700 to account for the equipment that is no longer going to be purchased. As I'm here, I'm going to ask if there's any questions at this point in time.
We'll do it by a show of hands if you have any particular questions at this point. If not, you want to continue on with them with the presentation, Mr. Bigger?
Sure. Okay. So where are we now in this new world that we're living in? For the 2019-2020 forecast with regards to revenue, we're anticipating a shortfall of about $1.9 million. This is based on conversations with our tax collectors with regards to where we see the numbers coming in at this point in time. Real estate collections are pretty much done already. We came in at 96.2%. We budgeted 96.1% of collections. All in all, it was a surplus of $144,657.77. We're anticipating the interim taxes to be about $350,000 short. The per capita tax, which we are not going to be holding much longer, about $50,000, $51,000 roughly combined by the year end. Occupational privilege tax is going to be about $47,000. We expect the earned income tax to come in about $336,000. This could be higher in talking with Berkheimer. We took a little bit of a middle of the road approach on that one. Real estate transfer taxes due to slower real estate sales tax, and hopefully we can get back to even selling them, could be about $134,000 short. The entity that created our amusement tax was sold. We'll no longer be budgeting for that in the future. That was about $41,000 short. Delinquent real estate taxes, as the offices are closed, the collection on delinquent real estate taxes is slow to non-existent at this point. That would be about a $619,000 shortfall. Interest income is going to come in roughly about $223,000 short. We were able, right before all this came in, as you may recall, to invest over $15 million in a bond CDs at 1.65%. And we were also able to put $5 million in a depository at a 2.03% yield. We also have been regularly checking banks and our local depositories that we work with on rates, and we've been moving money around. So when you get to the end of April, you'll see a lot of different swings in the bank balances as we're trying to put our money in the highest yielding rates to try and keep that number as high as possible with regards to interest income. Tuition for the evening schools, we did not completely run the spring programs. So there will be needs to refund some of the collections associated with the continuing education. And we're short about $44,000 in receipts from other LEAs as they are currently closed. Moving into the expenditures, we expect salary to have a $900,000 savings. This is the hiring of the staff that was, obviously we're not going to be hiring certain positions. We were supposed to move some of the money into the sub-costs, as previously stated. That was the plan this year, to keep the sub-costs down. Benefits, we also anticipate about a $900,000 savings, also related to hiring and choices that the staff, obviously there's different people that are coming in, and what their selections are and the choices that are being made. So even still, as we go through today, budget changes are occurring with people increasing their coverage amounts. So that's a projection at this point in time. We'll see where that comes in. I will also note that the healthcare consortium balance at this point in time is low, and there may be a requirement for us to pay into that, which would also reduce this savings at this point in time. But that remains to be seen where we finish the year end. Building budgets, obviously we're not going to be spending a lot of money on supplies or different items at the buildings. That'll save us about $220,000. Not being able to run the planned events for athletics, that'll save us about $65,000. We've made changes in the business office. Obviously, there's certain items that we're not going to be paying for with the schools being closed. That'll save us about $130,000. The offset to the continuing education is we will not be spending roughly $61,000. Personnel will come in $50,000 ahead. Obviously, the goal again was to move the salaries into the personnel budget. Obviously, that's not going to be necessary as we're not really having any substitute expenses. There'll be some that we're not going to really hit to the numbers that we anticipated. Pupil services are $108,000, and this is going to obviously also related to the fact we're not open. Transportation is the big driving windfall, is the fact that unfortunately the buses are not running. As much as the stress that gets me to run the buses, I would much prefer having them run. The savings that we have based on the proposed negotiations and contract up for discussion tonight will be roughly about $2 million for the school district. So all in all, when you put the shortfall in the revenue and you put the surplus that's going to be generated via the savings and expenditures, we're anticipating about a $2.7 million surplus at this point in time. Are there any questions at this point?
Mr. Winters?
Yeah, and
Go ahead, Ralph.
Tim,
No, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, so, Tim, the one that I don't really understand. First of all, we talked about this at the finance committee. I believe your revenue will. You took some very aggressive short-term hits related to the revenue. I think the revenue probably will be better than you forecast, but we'll see. But the one I didn't understand on the expense was the salary and the benefits explanation related to the benefits. If the salary was $900,000 of savings, how is the benefits $900,000 as well? There must have been some other cause related to the benefits on the surplus.
So the benefits are being driven by PEASers and Social Security. So the $900,000 in salary we're saving, there's 40%, give or take, roughly $360,000 of Social Security and PEASers expenses that are not being incurred. Additionally, we are unable, the difference in hiring and the times that we're hiring people, we are not paying benefits for those individuals that were planned and forecasted to be hired at this point in time. Again, the other piece of that was as the substitute costs increased, we were going to transfer that money into the substitute costs. We anticipated by this point to be roughly starting in our big substitute costs. So our substitute costs really start hitting when the warmer weather comes out, March, April, May. So we were anticipating at least another about $600,000 more to be transferred out of salaries and benefits into the personnel budget to cover the substitute cost that we did not budget for. Typically, we run about $1.6 million in substitutes. We only budgeted for about $950,000, and give me a little leeway. I can't remember the exact number. So we have about, so when we budgeted for about $700,000 not to be in the budget of the substitute costs. And that was supposed to be transferred over into that, thereby reducing the surplus in the salaries and benefits.
Okay, I think I got that.
Paul, can I piggyback on that for a second?
Yep,
I guess
I'm
I'm still not clear on where's the extra 600,000 in the benefits line item. So if 40% of it, 40% of it is associated with just the direct salary cost, what's the other 600 on the benefits line?
So you're going to have a savings in unemployment. You're going to have a saving because no one's being released, no one's going on unemployment. You're going to have a savings in tuition projected. You're going to have a savings that's going to occur in the benefits, healthcare benefits that were anticipated for staff to be hired. Just timing of when people come in and choices that people are making on that. They're the big drivers in that besides the Social Security. Obviously, our medical is one of the bigger drivers on that item. And again, the plan, when we budget for this, we budget for every individual in the school district only. So the staff that we have, their salaries and any contractual increases are moved into the next year's budget. They're selected, the current selected benefits, medical, prescription, dental, vision, life, all that stuff then also transfers over. Okay? And then on top of that, you calculate your PEAs and everything associated with that. Open positions, depending on the position, if it's a non-MEA, it's based on the level that the contractual obligation is, a C1, a C2, C3, whatever it may be. If it's an administrator, there's a salary associated with the prior administrator and their selections of healthcare choices that we use. And then if it's MEA, and depending on if it's a non-specialized, we'll do a bachelor's step 3, bachelor's plus 15 step 3. If it's something specialized like our famous German teacher, that will be budgeted for at a different rate because obviously it requires a different skill set, or more unique skill set, I should say, because of the German language. So that'll drive how we get to our salary and our benefits. All that information's put in. I mean, it's really straightforward as to what people have. Now, what can happen is open enrollment will close and all the selections will close, and someone may make a change at that point in time. So before by the time we get the budget approved, someone could have changed their situation. A life event can occur, and that will change and save the benefits, the healthcare and medical benefits. But typically, it's a straightforward one-for-one movement. What we did is we took the substitute cost of $1.6 million, reduced that down to $950,000, and said, we know there's going to be people that go on leave. We know there's going to be delays in hiring, and we're going to take that funds to reduce the surplus and move that into the substitute costs. We were pretty much on schedule with that, and then this hit. And obviously, I'm not projecting to move much, if any, of that savings over to substitute. There's no empty classrooms to, per se, have a substitute teacher come in and fill at this point in time.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I have some additional questions, but I think we'll save them for finance. We can get into the nitty gritty there. But just one more comment. I know we said it in finance, but I do like this format that you have here. I think this allows us to pinpoint more easily, where some of these issues are versus what we've seen in the past. So thanks for that.
Yep.
Are there any other questions from members of the board up to this point? Ms. Perdue?
Tim, I just have a question on one of your slides. You indicated savings due to renegotiating for transportation. Are you?
Subject to tonight's vote.
Oh, okay.
That can change. It's only a forecast, and it's only as good as the information I have at that point in time. If the vote changes, that obviously would change too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from members of the board? If not, Mr. Berger, you want to continue on with the last part?
Sure. Okay. So where do we stand with the 2020-2021 budget as of April? As presented in the Finance Committee, we have made changes from the March budget to the current budget and reduced the overall revenue by about $1.7 million. That gives us a real estate millage increase of 2.4572%. I apologize if it's small on your screens. It's small on my screens. That's based on lower collection rate, lower interest income, lower interest on taxable related items. So we're going to have lower income on the EIT that we were looking at potentially, and this is before all this other stuff hit. We also have state revenue that's associated with PSERS and Social Security as those items change based on staffing. An example in the next update will be if depending on the vote again tonight, there will be a change in salaries for the director of facilities. Also, things that we have to consider as we move into the future will be the assessment changes are on hold until the assessor's office can open. So right now, we're still working off the February assessments. We're not sure where property values are or where they will end up being by the time we get to June, and where we'll be able to run our numbers off of depending on when that office opens. The earned income taxes are being forecasted to be 10% to 20% lower than originally projected, and this is not factored into this presentation. To give you an example, the impact of that's a $700,000 to a $1.4 million shortfall. So that will obviously have a significant impact on our budget. Interest rates are continuing to fall. I was just informed by most of our depositors this week that they're going to be reducing rates again. As I said, we're constantly moving money. So when you see the end of April treasurer's report, it'll show a lot of cash moving into higher yielding interest rate areas. And obviously, as I said, Social Security changes and PSERS changes and benefit will come through as individuals are hired, changes, retirements, all that stuff plays into this. So as things occur, we update the budget to account for what our staff really looks like and what we really have. It's not that we're just plugging or leaving people in there. We're really being as dynamic as possible, and our software allows us to move that information in as things occur. So as HR advises us of what's occurring, we then make the changes in the budget. So it's very dynamic on that end. When you're looking at the expenses and the changes to the expenses, salary was reduced by $239,000. The benefits associated with that also reduced by $278,000. We had a reduction in consulting costs, tax collections, and summer community ed. Obviously, given the situation as we were in, that'll save us about $56,000. Other purchase services, which is a reduce in transportation cost, about $71,000. We reduced our supplies based on the surplus. Obviously, we keep looking at the surpluses. There's also unused supplies, so we were able to reduce our supplies by about $232,000. Property expenses went down. We removed the request for one of the vehicles by athletics by $10,000. And then again, subject to the vote, we had the change in the debt structure that has been proposed, and that will save us about $843,000 this year. Overall, it saves us $101.7 million to balance the budget. Areas of consideration have to be the third look for the healthcare costs. They'll need to be factored into the budget, up or down. We have PSERS and Social Security costs for any budget and staffing changes. And I can tell you that I just heard today, Methacton family grew by one yesterday, or at least they were entered into the system yesterday. So we had an individual move from husband and wife up to family. So, yes, up to family. So those things, as they occur, they're getting factored into the budget also, so that it will be constantly changing up until the time this is completed and approved by the board when we submit it for board approval. Are there any questions on this?
So before we take questions from the board, I think there's some other considerations that we had talked about in the Finance Committee meeting. The first one being that there has been some legislation in Harrisburg with regards to interest by legislators of preventing school districts from raising taxes from the 2019-20 school year. That would mean that if such legislation would pass, it would prevent the district from raising any additional mills than what was raised as part of the 2019-20 budget year. That in and of itself, as part of our discussion, further developed in having the Finance Committee ask Mr. Bricker and I to bring forward the potential other matters that could help us with budget challenges as presented here this evening. We are in the process of making that happen. We're hoping that we can come before the Finance Committee here in May with those recommendations. And obviously we'll be back to the board, not only at the work session, but the voting meeting in May for the proposed final budget. And with that said, while as part of the Act 1 process, we have a proposed final budget that is voted on in May, I believe it's clear to at least the members of the Finance Committee, but I'll say it here again, that it's likely going to take us all the way through June to get the best numbers possible to put our best foot forward. So doing anything in advance and assuming that our May vote is going to be the same vote and same numbers as June, given just time in and of itself and the economy and possibly some of the recommended changes in the budget, will likely require us to continue to thoroughly look beyond the May vote into June as a final budget process. Now, certainly, if such legislation does pass from the state, that is not only going to be a huge challenge for Methacton School District, but it is going to be a huge challenge across the Commonwealth. We have been having those discussions about what that would mean. We are prepared to have that discussion if it does come to a reality. But our goal right now is to make sure that we put the best, we have the finances associated with providing the best education that we can for the families in Methacton School District at a cost that is appropriate and in line with the expectations of our fiscal responsibility. So with that said, we'll open up questions not only to the last part that Mr. Bricker had, but also to the rest of the presentation. It looks like Mr. McGinnis has his hand raised.
Yeah, Dr. Zerbe, have we received any other updates from from Harrisburg, or is it still all up in the air and we're still at the who knows when or if that's going to happen stage?
What I know at this point is at the finance committee meeting and right around that same time, we were hearing a lot of chatter that bills were trying to be prepared and shopped around, I'll call it that. It then died off for a few days after that, but then it picked up just this week again, I think with more steam than ever. So there is a lot of concern about that. But I have not heard to this moment whether there are enough votes to get something like that passed.
Okay. And obviously, just as part of the finance committee, we all realize that if that does come down the pike and it's at zero, we're going to have to change these numbers drastically. So, don't fall in love with any of these numbers just yet.
Fair comment. Any other questions from members of the board on Mr. Brooker's presentation? Mr. Winters?
Yeah, I know, Tim, this is the April, but you did say you did get the third look. Was there a significant move in the third look related to health and prescription, medical and prescription?
There was a small reduction of about $160,000.
Okay. Yeah, and I just follow up on what Drew said. Some of the information I have read that gets passed through the newsletters and so forth that come around for us as board members are indicating that 5%, there's a projected 5% reduction in revenue overall for school districts. So when you think about if we are an average school district, and that will be the result of this in a year or two, it is at a $112 million, $114 million budget. You start to realize how the magnitude of what we're facing. And just to preview, I think a lot of those tough decisions that are going to be facing us even tonight has to be with that mindset of understanding that there's certainly local revenue, there's real estate tax shortages or lack of movement, but also just the ability for the state to subsidize or provide 20, 30, 40% for districts like us is probably going to be also diluted. So it's a bitter pill, but I just wanted to just sort of highlight what sort of the indications for, there's 69 attendees online as well. So it's good for people to understand that there's the awareness. I'm sure there's many that will point this out for us, but we are well aware of uphill battle that we're facing.
Thank you, Mr. Winters. Are there any other comments or questions for Mr. Bricker? Mr. Navarrete?
And not to beat a dead horse here, but I guess, we're at 2.6%. I don't think that's palatable to anybody right now under the given conditions. And I know we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes, so I don't want to go too far into the discussion about what's acceptable and what's not at this stage, because certainly I think we all know that there's more work to be done to get this down lower. Personally, I think we need to get as low as we can. I've said this before in finance and I've said it before in this meeting here, but I think it's important that we recognize that this does look like it will be the rainiest of rainy days as we look at possible PCERS increases over the next couple of years, whether they're temporary or not. Then we look at reduced revenue. So it's important, I think, for all of us to realize that we're going to have some tough decisions ahead of us. I know we know that. One of the things I'll recommend, and I know Dr. Zerbe, maybe you can comment on the specifics of it, but some of us have had discussions about what to do with the projected surplus from this year. And in the past, we've used that to offset borrowing for capital projects. Knowing that or expecting that we may have a significant increase in PCERS costs over the next year or two. Can you I guess, speak to what other districts have done? I know we haven't in the past, but in terms of committing those dollars towards a PCERS fund that we can draw off of to offset some of those expenses in the next couple of years?
Exactly, Mr. Navarrete. So for probably maybe the last 3 or 4 years, we've had conversations about, what's the best use of the surplus. And we've always recommended that any type of surplus from an operating year to the next be used to address one-time expenses. However, it's likely projected that there will be a spike in PSERS as a result of the downturn in the investment cycles, and it'll likely last more than 1 year. So some of the conversation right now, and when COVID-19 and closures and all that stuff was transpiring, they're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of possibly 45%. And so, those are astronomical numbers, especially when, as an organization, we are a people organization, and we depend on our people to get our work done. So adding, about a 10-15% additional cost on top of that, and equating that similar to what Mr. Winters talked about in terms of, the projections of revenue losses. It's almost like a worst case scenario possibility. So we can, as part of the board, and we would need to do this before June 30th of this year, is pass a resolution whereby a certain dollar amount, as the board sees appropriate, assuming that the forecast is in line, but we would say something to the effect that anything over a certain amount of surplus would then be put into a committed fund, which would allow the board to use as part of likely a two-year process, whereby helping subsidize the spikes in the PSERS rates. Certainly, if it lasts for longer than that, then it throws off the budget a little bit, because eventually, like any type of savings account that you put money in, it goes away at some point. So you would have to continue, funding that somehow, or you would know that you have to, at the same time you're drawing from it, you have to figure out ways to build money into it, depending on the projection for the long haul. But there's not enough information to even share with the board to say this is what will actually happen. We won't really know that until next year. So the PSERS rates are set for next year, but in next year, as we're preparing for the following year budget, we would have to anticipate that any surplus that the board would want to put into a committed fund could then be used to help offset those increases. And if at the time the board finds that the increases aren't to the level that they expected, the rules around committing funds from a surplus allows the board to uncommit those funds for other projects. So for example, to things that we have committed funds for in the past, like some of the master plan projects and other facilities related one-time expenses. So it does provide an opportunity for flexibility and potentially future-proofing some pretty hard years ahead. Are there any other questions from members of the board for Mr. Bricker and his presentation? If not, I want to thank you, Mr. Bricker, for putting that all together, and we appreciate your work on that. And Ms. President, that ends the guest and scheduled speakers for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Thank you, Mr. Bricker. Moving on to reports. Given the online format of this meeting, I'm going to recommend that we just present all committee reports by way of attaching the minutes to the agenda. That brings us down to the Education Foundation. And Ms. Krelovich. There she is. Do I need to do anything, Dr. Zerbe, to allow Ms. Krelovich to present, or does she just need to unmute and she can go ahead? Dr. Zerbe, you're muted.
Do you have anything that you want to share on the screen, Ms. Krelovich?
No, thank you.
Okay, you just want to speak? Microphone's yours.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for having me join you tonight. Wanted to give you some news from the foundation. Our dodgeball tournament has been postponed, as you know, and it remains postponed. We believe that when this crisis is over, a dodgeball tournament is just what we're going to need. Of course, when it's safe for us to throw things at each other and be in close proximity. We're hoping to reschedule for the fall, and we will be ready to pivot in case that doesn't work. We also are going to be continuing to run our Share the Love campaign that was hugely popular last year, giving families the opportunity to show appreciation of our teachers, staff, and administrators. This year, the program will look a little bit different. We will be running it as a virtual program where families can download the certificate from our website and send it to their teachers digitally. We also are going to be waiving the minimum required donation so that all families, regardless of financial situation, can send something to their teachers showing their gratitude and appreciation. You may have heard that 3 weeks ago, the foundation launched the Methacton COVID-19 Relief Fund, aimed at tackling the urgent needs and potential long-term needs of our district stemming from the COVID-19 crisis. We are very grateful for donations we've received already from parents, from teachers, from staff, neighbors, and even local businesses such as Dunkin' Donuts in Worcester and Sentinel Capital Advisors. And in fact, just today, Shirton Inc., who has been a longtime partner of both the foundation and the district, announced that they are donating 100% of the proceeds from their small town Big Heart t-shirts to the Methacton COVID-19 Relief Fund. Tonight, I am really excited to announce that as a result of these generous donations and others, and our foundation board of directors, we are presenting a check in the amount of $5,000 to the Methacton Backpack Program.
Awesome.
The $5,000 that we are donating to the Backpack Program will be to provide for our economically disadvantaged students in the district when the backpacks are distributed in May. So we'd like to thank all of our donors who made this possible and my board of directors who made this possible. There's so much more we can do, but we are really grateful for this community who's helped us to support those in need in the district. Thank you. That's all my report unless there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Krelovich, for all that you have always done for the Education Foundation and continue to do during these difficult times. I know our families greatly appreciate it.
If I could just add one thing, I just want to really say that that check for the backpack program is so well, I can't thank you enough, because we will say that we cleared out all the schools and all the food for the backpack program. So there are empty shelves. So we can't thank you enough for reaching out to the community and helping us with this program. So thank you.
And since we have such a large audience this evening, if people wanted to continue to donate to support the backpack program, the COVID Relief Fund, or anything else that the Education Foundation is doing, what's the best way for them to do that, Ms. Krelovich?
Going to our website, it is methactonfoundation.org. You can also find us on Facebook, and through our website, you can look up our address if you'd like to mail a check, or you can make a secure credit card donation right on our website. Thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, absolutely. You can also see examples of some of the other amazing programs that the Education Foundation has helped us to fund over the years, not just in this time of crisis. So thank you, and thank you to anyone who is listening right now who may end up making a donation. We appreciate it. I just got a message from Miss Reese that she had a comment for the IU and the North Monco Technical Career Center. So Miss Reese, I apologize for skipping right over those. Go ahead.
No problem, and I'll make it short. It's just that we don't attach minutes for those, and I wanted to acknowledge one of our tech students. There was nothing that I have to share here for the tech meeting other than we had it, and their business, they're doing strong over there, and they did want to thank us for being one-to-one, because not all high schools are, but all the 5 high schools of the Tech Center are one-to-one, and that made their lives incredibly better for their students. So they did want us to thank you, but I wanted to recognize, and I feel terrible because in my home office, craziness. I'm not used to working from home as my real job or my volunteer job. There was a senior automotive student that was the Tech Center's March Student of the Month, and that is Methacton's second Student of the Month for the Tech Center in recent months. So I did want to do a shout out to Jack. And Jack, I was writing so fast, your last name is either Rhodes or Rosen, something like that. My penmanship teacher would be ashamed at me. But he's a senior in the automotive program. So Jack, I wanted to thank you. And to my board members, since there's so much legislation going on, and the IU is our biggest, other than Dr. Zerbe, is our biggest source of information for that with Tina Valletta. I did want you to know that, like I did last week or earlier this week with the 0% possibility, if I get anything of urgency, or not, urgency, but anything I think you should know, I will forward it, because I know Dr. Zerbe is communicating with us as much as he can. But I did want to let you know, as soon as I get anything, I will forward it to you, because Tina is such a good resource. I'll let it go. Leave it at that. Long meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. So going back in order now, we'll look to Ms. Kelly and communications.
Thank you, Madam President, and good evening, everyone. I have a few items to share with you all tonight. Methacton School District is proud to have been awarded $221,370 in school safety grants by the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquencies School Safety and Security Committee. Among the 24 Montgomery County schools approved for this grant award, Methacton received the 5th largest amount. Methacton plans to use the award to expand our Raising Expectations and Children's Hopes program, also known as the REACH program, for students at Methacton High School. REACH is a school-based intensive mental health program delivered in partnership with Springfield Psychological. State Senator Katie Muth and Representatives Joe Webster and Matt Bradford plan to join us virtually at the May regular board meeting to help us formally recognize this important initiative to support safe school environments. This past Monday, the district opened our online process for kindergarten registration for the 2020-2021 school year. A link to the process can be found on the homepage of our website. Additional information regarding new student registration for all other grades is forthcoming. Also on Monday, the board held a special meeting on full day kindergarten. A presentation on the topic and a link to the special meeting video can be found by visiting our website and checking under the featured news and announcements section. The district is accepting public comment on full day kindergarten via email through May 31st. So please email your comments, questions, or feedback to information@methacton.org. And just a reminder for members of the community who are interested in staying up to date on the Arrowhead Forward process, all presentations related to the process are posted in the Arrowhead Forward section of the district's website. And you can also subscribe for email updates there as well. And that concludes my communications report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. And now for our superintendent's report, Dr. Zerbe.
I do not have any items for the board this evening.
Okay, thank you. I will say Dr. Zerbe has been making sure that even though he has no report tonight, has been communicating a great deal to his staff, to our families, to all of his administration. He's been doing a fabulous job of keeping us all in the loop in these difficult times. So while there's no report tonight, there's definitely been regular reporting. So thank you.
Well, we did put out a good morning Methacton video this morning.
I saw that.
We had fun with that. So certainly we hope that message was well received, and we certainly think it was appropriate. So thanks.
Definitely. Okay, so with that, the board will now take comments on board action items. So this is an opportunity for residents to comment on matters that are to be decided upon as outlined on the agenda. The board asks that you keep comments to 4 minutes or less. Board of directors may choose to respond to matters following the conclusion of the comments on board action items. So this means while you may have questions related to some of these items, this is not going to be a question and answer format. It really impedes the overall flow of the meeting when we do that. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. Just understand that you won't be getting an answer right then and there. I'm going to go in order of the pre-registered list that I have here. I see that we have some people who are not identified by name on the list. So the first name that I have is Amna Khan. If there is someone with that name that's possibly not listed by their name, could you raise your hand? Okay, next I have Jim Malik. No, okay. Maria Teresa. No. Amanda. Jitendra Kunar. Malik Staton. Lisa Meckes. Nikki Sloan. Christina Latsko. Mike Ryan. I know I saw that name on there. Trying to find you on my list. There's a lot of names here. Okay. Mr. Ryan, you are in the meeting. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Michael Ryan, Lower Providence. I'm going to try and talk quickly here as I have 3 topics I want to try to get to. The first is in regards to the bond resolution. I was just wondering if there was any discussion, I brought this up before, around using this year's surplus to pay down the existing debt. And in doing this, could it have the same desired effect of reducing the budget for next year as the bond refinancing and restructuring would that you're going to vote on this evening? I would also ask, if this is not a possibility, could you create a debt service committed fund similar to the one that we had talked about for the PSERS, where the surplus could be used to handle the coming year's spikes in the budget? I will also say for transportation, I'm shocked that this is still on the agenda for this evening. I thought after last week that hopefully someone from First Student would be here to talk about this. It appears that that's not going to happen. So I don't think this should be approved to pay for services that were not received. In fear the First Student will not properly staff Methacton for next year. Seems a bit absurd to me. Also, there's nothing in the amendment that you're going to vote on this evening guaranteeing the school district side of the bargain. So if you're going to vote yes to pay for this, I really encourage language to be added guaranteeing whatever staffing levels they're promising you, that language be added to the amendment. Finally, for our COLA, I think this is way too short of a process. It was not at the Education Committee meeting. The chair's comments of the Education Committee from last week seemed to be against this idea in her comments last week. And it seems as if the board, I'm not sure exactly when you received your binder with the presentation, but it seems as if you've only had a week to fully digest this important change in our COLA's curriculum. And if the problem you're trying to address in our COLA is the ELA scores, I just question, why is adding more time the only solution to the problem? Has the entire existing curriculum been analyzed to identify any deficiencies? I think to make changes to other programs to try to fix another one without really understanding what you plan on doing with that time exactly and how you're going to do that, may not be the smartest move. And with that, I will conclude. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and stay healthy, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Next, I have Mr. Earnshaw. Let me find you on my list here. Mr. Earnshaw, you're in.
Thank you and good evening. Brian Earnshaw, Lower Providence. I'd like to comment on 2 items on the voting agenda for this evening. First is item 10E, the bond resolutions. As I stated last week, I see absolutely no need to borrow $18 million now to fund capital projects and or the Arrowhead new Arrowhead construction. You had just previously talked about budget concerns, and adding $18 million of debt to service do not help alleviate any of those budget concerns. Also, I don't think the existing debt should be refinanced. I agree with Mr. Ryan's suggestion to possibly pay down some debt if possible. And while you get some one-time savings from refinancing the debt, it doesn't fix the structural issues that are apparent and readily visible in the budget. So I encourage the board to vote no on both of those bond resolutions. In addition, another reason is that there's been no forecast put forward to show how that debt service is going to be handled, not only for next year, but in future years as well. Second item is item 10F, the transportation contract amendment. It's just beyond me, and I see absolutely no reason why that the district should pay a vendor for services not provided. This item is $788,000 when you add up all the amounts that to be paid for a student, again, for no services being provided. And that could go a long way to solve some of your budget issues for next year and beyond. I did note the liquidated damage provisions added to the contract. But if there's not a willingness to enforce these, as has been the case in the past, such provisions really have no teeth. They're not worth the paper they're written on. So I would encourage the board to vote against that contract amendment as well. And thank you, and that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Earnshaw. Next, I have Joyce Chambers. So Joyce, if you are in the meeting, please push the button to raise hand. Next, I have Amanda Filomeno. Okay. Nicholas Preet. Sarah Zinar. Jennifer Hahn. Oh, I see a hand raised. Thank you, Ms. Hahn. You're in the meeting. You can unmute and go ahead and whenever you're ready.
Hi, Jennifer Hahn from Lower Providence. I agree with Mr. Ryan's statements about the proposed changes to Arcola's education program. It does seem like it was hastily done, and maybe not all stakeholders really have had full input. I also agree with the reading. I mean, I understand the rationale for proposing changes to the curriculum. I support some of the proposed changes, but I guess with regard to the reading aspect, I also don't understand why more is necessarily the answer. Plus, even if more is the answer for some students, I don't necessarily think it's the answer for all students, and more could actually do more damage than good for some students. But some of my concerns mostly pertain to, I guess, the world language changes that have been proposed. I certainly support the idea of world language being started earlier in 7th grade, but one major concern is splitting that 1 year of language into 2 parts across 2 grades. For one, it let's say you have one teacher now teaching just all of the 8th grade students. If that one single teacher is now expected to teach both 7th and 8th, the number of students has essentially doubled, which drastically increases the workload, even if they are teaching still the same number of days per week. And there's nothing in the proposal that I see that really addresses how that would be handled, if there'd be additional teachers hired, or what to make sure that the proper student-teacher ratio is met, and that a core subject like world language would be properly served. And then also I looked at the presentation that was provided last week, and there was comparisons made to other districts about how that there's 6 other districts in the county that also teach the level 1 world language over both 7th and 8th grade. But there are very crucial differences really between those other programs and the one proposed. I mean, Lower Merion School District starts world language in elementary school. Wissahickon and Colonial School District begin foreign language in 6th grade. And some of the programs still teach every single day for all of 8th grade. And they also have other differences, I'm sure, the number of world language teachers, the student-teacher ratio, and so on. So comparisons to other districts aren't necessarily equivalent. And plus, even though comparisons to other districts can be useful information, I think it's more useful to really focus on which programs produce the best outcomes for world language learners. And this applies really to all subjects, reading as well as any other subjects that are being addressed. And it seems like reading and world language are the biggest changes being proposed. But, which programs produce the best outcomes and why, and make curriculum decisions based on what the best available evidence is. And I don't necessarily have the answer, but it seems like some of the things that should be considered and addressed are not even in the proposed changes. And to approve something like that without knowing more details and really fully addressing all of the things that all the stakeholders have to, all of their input, I think is just premature. But thank you all for listening, and stay safe, and have a great night.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. Okay, next I have Danielle Thompson. If you're in the meeting, please raise your hand. Okay. Next I have Kelly Ames, and I know I saw you on the list. Give me 1 second. Okay, Miss Ames, you are in the meeting. You can go ahead.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Dr. Zerby, school board members. I am a Methacton grad, and I'm in my 31st year of teaching health and physical education at Arcola. School board, just want you to know that I have enjoyed teaching and still enjoy teaching your children, so thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts and concerns with you tonight. My concerns are with the proposal to reduce the amount of physical education at Arcola. I feel we have one of the best programs in the area, perhaps the best in the state. Our students are fortunate enough to have physical activity every other day for the entire year. I know we have more minutes than neighboring districts, but why do we have to reduce? Maybe they should be the ones adding to their programs. After all, what's wrong with raising the bar? Being the best, isn't that what Methacton Pride is all about? And we all know that now, more than ever in this age of technology, being active is crucial to our overall well-being. And speaking of pride, our department has impacted the lives of so many students by being a part of our program. They have gone on to live healthy, fulfilled lives. Some have even gone on to be health and PE teachers, even in our district, and employees in the health and fitness fields, due largely in part to the PE experience at Arcola. Yet we want to take that away. The American Heart Association recommends middle school children have 60 minutes of exercise a day. This is due to the benefits we get from exercise, as you all know, such as improving overall physical health and mental wellness. It improves our ability to think and learn, which increases test scores. Physical education is also the place where students can cooperate with each other, learn about sportsmanship and teamwork, all lifetime skills. It just gives students a chance to move, which we all know they need to do. With this proposal, the students will have PE for 45 days, and that's it for their entire school year. This is really not acceptable. For some students, this is the only activity they will get. I understand someone has recognized the need for change at Arcola, but why take away students' time to be active to accomplish this task? We keep getting encouragement from principals, administrators to get outside, get fresh air, enjoy time with others, exercise. Yet it's these same people who want to significantly reduce the physical education program. It just doesn't make sense to me. I know wellness is also a part of the proposal, and the students at Arcola do get mental health in 8th grade, and I'm confident we could incorporate it into our 7th grade program as well, without taking away activity time. Again, I've been a part of this program for 31 years. I love the department I work with. You can't ask for better role models. It would be a great loss for incoming students to miss the health and physical education experience at Arcola. In closing, I know test scores and money are major concerns, but if you don't have your health, do test scores really matter? Let's keep our kids moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ames. Next on the list, I have Georgianne. I see a hand raised. Oh, that was Ms. Ames, okay. Then I have Jessica Viscusi. All right. Ms. Viscusi, you are in.
Oh, sorry.
Ms. Viscusi, you're in the meeting. You can unmute and go ahead whenever you're ready. Okay. Maybe she's not ready to go right now. I have Pete DiPiano. I see a hand. 1 second. All right, Mr. DiPiano, you are in the meeting. You can unmute and go ahead.
Hey, good evening. Thank you. Pete DiPiano, Lower Providence Township. I have 2 6th graders at Skyview, and I'm speaking against the proposed Arcola programming change. Ask that you table it tonight for a variety of reasons. Miss Ames said it best. She so eloquently just spoke about very similar reasons. I'm bringing a background perspective, not just as a parent, but also as a public school math teacher, and also as someone who's been involved in our local youth sports leagues for quite a while. I love hearing the mental health aspect piece of the proposal, especially in this current climate, but the physical goes hand in hand with the mental. So I can't support any of the proposed program enhancements at the expense of how you're proposing to schedule and diminish phys ed. I have no statistical studies I can quote. All I have is anecdotal experience teaching in schools for the years. And, as much as I'd like to think as teachers, we do our best to help kids learn the academic subjects, the bottom line is especially at the middle school level, 7th and 8th grade emerging adolescents, they need physical activity. They need phys ed. If you polled kids, you discover probably many kids would say, phys ed's still my favorite class. Forget about math. And they would tell that to my face. It's what they look forward to during the course of a week, because academics may be tough for them. And not just a week, over the course of a full year. So seeing that, it would be, phys ed would be loaded up in the proposal for just one marking period, I think it's a bad solution. I would ask that every effort could be made to ensure that phys ed is a year-long class for our students at Arcola. And I'll just close with this quickly. All of us here, as we head into the summer, we're all crossing our fingers that kids can play sports this summer, whatever the sport may be, baseball, softball, soccer, lacrosse. We're all crossing our fingers and hoping. We all know that there may be a time where we may have to share some bad news to everyone in the community. So to propose this type of a phys ed change now, I think it's really bad timing, and I would ask that you table this. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and be safe.
Thank you, Mr. DiPiano. I have Mike Greeley next. No. Kristen Sherman. I see a Kristen. I don't know if that's Kristen Sherman. Can you indicate by raising your hand? Okay. Next I have Mr. Bickelman. 1 second. There you are. All right, Mr. Bickelman, you are in the meeting. You can unmute and go ahead.
First, I'd like to say that Kelly Ames, she rocks. I love her. I'd like to speak to one item, one item and then some additional items I have. Item 10C, budgetary transfers. There's a budgetary transfer that totals $228,974. It's coming out of function 2340, and it doesn't have a reason. As to the transfer coming out of that function, on April 15th at the Finance Committee, I asked the same question, and all I heard was crickets. Nobody responded. The next day, Mr. McGinnis responded to me and gave me a reason that he acquired from Mr. Bricker. I told Mr. McGinnis in an email on the 16th that he should include this in the work session so the rest of the board and the public can see what the reason is for a $228,000 transfer. And it wasn't in the work session, and it's still not included as a reason on tonight's budgetary transfer that's up for approval or consideration. The next thing I want to talk about are the bond resolutions. You're restructuring bonds from 2013 and 2016. I'd like to know what the additional cost is to retire those bonds. I understand it's going to create $800,000, but that was put in place to handle the new payments for borrowing for a new Arrowhead. And I think there's no need for a new Arrowhead. So, there's no emergency to have the taxpayers pay an additional $713,000 just in interest costs to restructure those bonds. So I'd like to know how much more it's going to cost to retire those bonds compared to as they exist right now. I wouldn't approve the first student payment for no services. That's just a no-brainer. Ralph Navarrete expressed his interest in not approving that for the other night at the work session. I'd like to hear more about the employment of Mr. Jones as the Director of Facilities. I'd like to know what his credentials are. I'd like to know how the salary compares to Mr. Fretz going out. And you got to remember, when Mr. Fretz came here, he came into a position that was entitled Facilities Engineer, and the job was changed to Facilities Director. Mr. Fretz came here from the same school district that Mr. Whiteleather came from, Hamburger Area School District. He kind of followed on the coattails of Mr. Whiteleather, who was the business manager here. So I'd like to hear more about Mr. Jones and what his credentials are, and if he even has an engineering degree or anything like that. Maybe we can get the job description back to where it was. So I'd like to see that addressed in more detail. And the K-12 counselor that's retiring, I'm sure she's done a great job. That position is only about 3 years old. I think it came about through the closure of Audubon Elementary. The fact that we didn't want to lay off another counselor because we have counselors in every grade level and every building. And I think the job was created, K-12 career counseling, just so that we didn't lay anybody off because of the closing of Audubon. Because I think that initiative, K-12 career counselor, if it was so important, it should have been put in years ago. But I think it just protected somebody's position through the Audubon layoff. We didn't lose any counselors when Audubon was closed. So I think that's why it came about. But I respect Mrs. Schmidt's work, and she probably did a good job. But we do have counselors in every building, every elementary building, and multiple counselors in the secondary schools, Arcola and places like that. So they should get together and coordinating K-12 counseling for these kids, and really don't need an overseer like that. So that was a new position. It's only about 3 years old.
Thank you, Mr. Bickelman.
Yeah.
Okay, next I have Michael Caffrey. If you could raise your hand if you're in the room. Okay. And then I have John Andrews. I saw you in there, Mr. Andrews. You just popped to the top of the list. 1 second. Okay, Mr. Andrews, you're in the meeting. You can go ahead and unmute and start when you're ready.
I'm ready. John Andrews, Lower Providence. I want to talk to a number of vote items for this evening. About the two bond resolutions. The one for refinancing, the smaller one, I think it would be better to use recent surpluses to reduce borrowing costs in peak years rather than spending over $700,000 basically for capitalized interest or the equivalent no type of spending. The big one, the 18 million, no. Arrowhead lacks justification. Option C is justified, where option C is grade restructuring without the Arrowhead School. We have plenty of capacity, and that would save $50 million worth of expense for capital for a construction of a building that we do not need. I'm sure you've heard that story already. With regard to the first student fourth contract amendment, 50% of what it would have been with students in the schools seems quite high compared relative to what we get for it. I think 25% is better, but I don't know much about the details. And I'm wondering, is there a date set up for the investigation of that contract, as Mr. Navarrete has suggested? And also, what if the schools are reopened? You know, if the virus goes away, could we reopen the schools on June 1 and by June 30th have the students better prepared for entrance into the following grade come the fall? I sent a letter today to Governor Wolf suggesting that reopening the schools at some point is a possibility if things go well with the virus. Regarding Mr. Jones, I reiterate what Mr. Bickelman said, that when Mr. Fretz was hired, the requirements were cut. So what part of his resume meets our needs? I know there was an there was a solicitation of resumes, interviews, et cetera, but are we giving the facilities needs of the district proper attention? Item 12B on the vote list, the changes at Arcola. I understand adding to the reading. I'm wondering, there was a notation about M period, P period, which obviously stands for marking period. What is the length of the marking period? Is it like 6 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever? What is it? And with regard to the overall daily current and proposed schedules, I don't have a good understanding of the last period of the day called Warrior Win. That's at 45 minutes. If that was at 30 minutes, I think that the 15 minutes might be added to the physical exercise part of the day. When I was a youngster in 7th and 8th grades, I had very little physical education, but I had a bike route for delivering afternoon newspapers to 100 homes to their front door.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Looks like we've reached the end of our public comment on board action items. So with that, I'm going to move on to the rest of the agenda. So may I have a motion to approve the virtual board meeting minutes for the meeting held on March 31st, 2020 as attached? Mr. McGinnis? And a second?
I second.
Ms. Drummond? All those in favor? All right, I'm gonna, actually, I apologize. I need to figure out the best way to see all of the board members at the same time here. That's not ideal. Mr. Summers, is it required that we do a roll call vote for this or for the rest of the agenda?
There's no requirement for a roll call vote. My recommendation, and I think the board has followed this previously, is to hold a roll call vote in the event that there are any no votes on any item, just to clarify for the minutes who voted how. The other suggestion is just when the vote is taken on any item, the most important thing is just for everyone to unmute their microphone and for the vote to be able to be heard at that time.
Okay, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to necessarily hear everybody, so let's do this. All of those in favor of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I can definitely hear if somebody says that they're opposed, which no one did, so we'll just go forward with that. Does that satisfy all legal requirements there, Mr. Summers?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Learning as we go here. Speaking of which, may I have a motion to approve the suspension of Board Policy 006.2 with specific regard to the limitation on the number of school directors participating in a meeting electronically, the requirement of having a majority of the board physically present at a meeting location, and the holding of votes by roll call?
I so move. Andrea.
Mrs. Reese, and a second?
Samira Purdue.
Ms. Purdue. Any comments from the board? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries 9-0. Fiscal items, Mr. Bricker.
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight for your approval, we have the list of bills, treasurer's report, budgetary transfers, the general supply bid award, which is $10,000 less than the prior year, consisting of $184,215.13 for the general supplies, and the MCIU Consortium District general supplies in the amount of $72,395.25. There's also two bond resolutions, Bond Resolution 20-2 for the restructuring of bonds Series A 2013 and portions of Bond Series 2016. There's also the adopt the resolution of 20-3, which is to issue the Series A of 2020 for various capital projects in the school district. We also have the transportation contract amendment for first student and a master plan projects to authorize the administration to issue notice of permission to resume construction activities to all contractors associated with board-approved master plan projects. This permission is to inform the contractors of the critical nature and site availability so that they can resume construction projects under the executive orders of the governor.
Mr. President,
Thank you, Mr. Bricker. I'm sorry.
it's important to note that item 10E requires a roll call vote.
Yep, I have that in my notes here. Thank you. So what I'd like to do then is take a motion to approve items 10A through D. So that's the list of bills, treasurer's report, budgetary transfers, and general supplies bid awards.
So motion.
Mr. McGinnis, and a second.
I second the motion.
Ms. Cancro. Any comments from the board?
I have a couple questions. I usually leave most of this finance conversations to the finance committee because it's the only committee I've never been on in 5 years, but I wanted a couple clarifications for myself. One is, can we answer Mr. Bickelman's question about the two? I think we did at the last work session, but I cannot remember. So can we answer that question about the $228,000 budget transfer?
Sure,
It is noted in the minutes.
Okay, thank you. I thought we answered it. And as far as the bond resolution, and I'm not questioning it necessarily, but I had a long talk today.
We're not voting on that right now, Andrea.
Oh, sorry, apologize. I think I hit the questions for, I thought she said 10 to 10 through E. She said D.
Yes, D as in dog.
I apologize. I thought you said D. Gotcha.
That's okay. Anyone else for items A through D? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. So now we're going to take separately the bond resolutions. And Mr. Summers, I have to take these as two individual items, correct?
Yes, I'd recommend that.
Okay, so can I have a motion to adopt Resolution 20-2 as prepared by Bond Council authorizing issuance of general obligation bonds and notes, Series of 2020, for the purpose of refunding the district's general obligation notes, Series A of 2013, and a portion of the district's general obligation bonds, Series of 2016. Mr. McGinnis, and a second, Mr. Navarrete. Any comments from the board?
Just a question. It's not, I'm not questioning the finance committee's decisions or anything like that. I just more wanted to understand a little bit more about our plan, because I had a very long talk today with another member of the MCIU board who's in Montgomery County, neighboring our district. And they're in a different situation than us. They're not a bedroom community, but he talked to me a lot about bringing down their debt service. And it was very interesting. And they're in a different position than we are in a lot of ways. So I'm not comparing us to them because it's apples and oranges. My question is, what is our plan? You know, we have to build this building. We have big things, but I know it's a difficult question to answer quickly, but what is our plan for our debt service? Like, at all, other than just acquiring debt, what is our plan to bring it down? And you can kind of speak to me in a layman's term.
I'll take that one. I think you have to break them out, right? The first one, the 20-20, excuse me, the 20-2 is basically a refinance, right? So it's a way for us to smooth our cash flows in the coming years, which will spike in the 22-23. So we have a bubble that we have to worry about. And candidly, just so everyone knows, that bubble has been exacerbated over the last 45 days. And you guys can say, we can use the refund to do it. That refund last year, or excuse me, the surplus, not the refund, my fault, the surplus from last year will not even come close to what we need to handle the storm that is about to break on us. Now remember, there's a lag here, right? All the numbers that Mr. Bricker presented are current, right? But when people have lost their jobs, we're now looking into next year's tax revenue being cut significantly. We're looking at people in Harrisburg talking about having us at a 0% tax rate. We need to smooth our cash flows out, and we need to hoard capital right now, because we have a storm coming in this district, and we are not alone. We're in every district, that we need capital to allocate to a variety of unknowns right now. So to sit here and say, well, it's going to cost this. Yes, there's an expense to it, 100%. But I would implore people here to look at the value of what we're getting, not the expense. And again, the expense is a big number, but that's over the life of the bond. So when you look at debt servicing and bonds are simply IOUs. That's all they are. So yes, there's an expense to it, but you cannot view it through the prism, my opinion. You cannot view this through the prism of cost. You must look through the prism of value. What value do we get at it? We get to stabilize our cash outlays over the next, we avoid the bubble, basically. We're paying to avoid the bubble. And ironically enough, that may be when the wave has really broken over us as a school district. So we look hard and long at this vote, because if we say no, we are going to now have to take care of the bubble somehow. And again, the surplus from last year just isn't going to cover it. We are going to be hemorrhaging cash, and we're going to have to make serious cuts. And it's not cutting fat here. We're going to cut into red meat in this district. And that's a race to the bottom, guys. And we have to address that, and we have to address it now, because this can has been kicked down the road. This bubble didn't magically appear over the last 45 days. It's been on our schedule of debt servicing for a while now, and it's been ignored. So we can sit here and say, oh my God, it's going to cost this. That's way too much. I don't want to do it. Okay. But if anybody else has any better ideas on how we manage our cash flows over the next 2 to 3 years in response to this tsunami that we're in right now, I'm all ears. So that's basically it. So hopefully that answers your question, Andrea.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Drew, I want to thank you for saying that so eloquently. To add to that, Andrea, one of the things that we do in your own property, obviously, we're the ones that are incurring the majority of this debt for the district as we make all these capital improvements. You know that the debt has been around this $9.5 to $10 million. Our debt service overall has been $9.5 to $10 million. And one of the things that has been a focus of mine since I've come on the board has been to try to draw down that debt. And what we've done over the last couple of years is to not incur that $9 million a year. We've been numbers around 4. We do surplus to pay down. We paid 7. So by incurring less new debt than the debt we're paying off, we're slowly chewing down at it. If you think about it, making like making more than the minimum payment on your credit card bills, in essence.
Thank you both.
Yeah, but and again, when we get into the this is how I run my house, therefore this is how the school district should run it, that's amazingly myopic, and I'm sorry if I'm insulting anybody, but because there aren't a lot of moving parts on how we get cash flow here. We either get tax revenue, and it's all its various forms, obviously real estate being the primary driver, or we borrow money. And there will always be debt here. This fantasy that a school district should have no debt on its book because, wow, we paid off all our credit cards. That is not asymmetrical. That is not a straight line thinking. You either get revenue, you raise taxes, which no one wants to do. And oh, by the way, we're all taxpayers here, right? We're not some Boston consulting group where we get parachuted in here and take our private jets home after we bang our gavels. We're all taxpayers, so it affects all of us. Or we borrow money by bond issuances. And that's really the 2 major levers that we have. So to talk to someone and says, you guys have way too much debt on the books, you should get that to 0. That's a fodder. That's fantasy camp thinking. And I have to stand on my stump and preach that. And if anyone disagrees with me, you're entitled to.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just
Go
have
ahead.
one question. And this can go to Tim, Drew, or Ralph. Just when we look at 1 and 2, when we look at 20-2 and 20-3, is there, and I guess I'm still struggling with this. I've met with Tim and talked to some other members of finance, and looking at it, is there any advantage over doing one over the other? Because what I struggle with is the whole issue of borrowing an excessive amount of money when we still talking about, when I look at our financial situation right now.
No, that's a fair question, Samira. And they're really 2 bonds because they're really two different tools, if you will. The first one, the one that we're talking about now, the 20-2, is, like I said, is really a stabilization of your cash outflows, and that's all it is. And we have this bubble that I talked about that's coming, that's peaking in, call it, 3 years. And that's really what the goal of that is. We're refinancing, and we're trying to smooth our cash outflows. And the other one that we'll talk about next is kind of a different animal in that it's more for plant, property, and equipment. It's for facilities. It's for buildings. things like that. So that's why there's two. They're really two different tools that we want to put in our toolbox, or we're looking to put in our toolbox. Hopefully that answers your question.
Are there any other comments from the board? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Winters, I didn't realize you were raising your hand. Go ahead.
Sorry. As I mentioned before, I think in the March meeting, this one is the item, the first refinancing is a tough one for me. I understand what Drew is saying, and I also believe that there is valid considerations about when you do have, we are going to have more than, let's see here, 2 points. I'm confident to predict that our surplus this year will be more than $2.7 million. It probably, depending on what happens on later on votes, could be closer to $3.5–4 million. So the bubble that we're talking about potentially having is making a decision down the road. Well, at some point we have to make the vote on if we're going to build this building or not in Arrowhead. So the bubble that we've seen is related to those additional borrowings to build that over that time period. So it's not a bubble. It's been pretty level if we weren't doing that, we've been pretty much had that in that $9.5 to $10 million range for the next 7 or so years. So the bubble that would be self-induced. So I'm torn on this one a little bit, because before I believed that the Peasers was going to kill us. And I know that it confuses me actually when I talk about it, but the reality is that the Peasers are not going to increase next year. They would probably increase dramatically, $2 or $3 million potentially, depending on how bad the market is doing at that point in time. So in the following year. So I absolutely agree with Drew. Trying to eliminate the possibility of having to make tough decisions on programs and class sizes and all the educational aspects. But at the same time, it is a possibility that we can use this surplus to pay down that bubble if we decide to go for that bubble, if not. And the other thing is that we in Drew's language there, we can't hoard cash. We have to have that, whatever we decide to do with that money, we have restrictions on what we have in the fund balance. And honestly, I would advocate that this is the time that we would be considering using our fund balance. So I am torn on this, but I am probably going to vote no on this, to just be clear.
Do we have any other comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move to a roll call vote, and I apologize, we're just going in alphabetical order, so it's the way it's going to be. Ms. Cancro, you're up first.
Yes.
Ms. Drummond?
Yes.
Ms. Hull?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Navarrete?
Yes.
Ms. Purdue?
No.
Ms. Reese?
No.
Mr. Winters?
No.
And I am a yes. So that's a vote of 6-3, and the motion passes. And now I will take a motion to adopt Resolution 20-3 as prepared by Bond Counsel, authorizing the issuance of General Obligation Bonds Series A of 2020 to fund various capital projects of the district as further described in the resolution.
Yes.
Motion.
Mr. McGinnis and Mr. Navarrete as a second. Are there any comments on this item?
So
Go ahead, Paul.
yeah, on this one, no matter what we decide to do with Arrowhead, one of the things that we have that there was a lot of work done in schools over time, but when we ended up having a facilities study that gave us 85, 90, whatever you can pull things in and out of what was in that facility report. But it was a big chunk of change that faced us in the next 10 years. And the board has done a good job, and the previous board did a good job of starting to tackle those infrastructure issues that we have in our existing buildings. So if this $16 million, $18 million ends up being used only for MEP projects or the facade at Eagleville, I'm fine with it. The cost of money is good right now. So I am going to be supporting item E2.
Thank you, Mr. Winters. Mr. McGinnis?
Yeah, I will be supporting it also because as much as our world has changed, the fact that things are still falling apart in our school district hasn't, and we still need to have those upkeep. And right now, the cost of capital, you could arguably say never be lower. And again, we're all taxpayers here, so this is not something from on high that we're casting upon everyone. But this was already in the plans. I believe there's some premium calculations that actually go through. Mr. Bricker, I don't know if you want to speak to that or not on this bond issuance that will also be advantageous to us. But we still need to be able to fix all the leaking roofs, all the things the projects that we have, and those things will not stop deteriorating if we don't get this money. So I think it's one of those things that, on some possible other levels, maybe we could say, hold on it. But right now, the things that we already had eyeballs on with this money are still there. And to ignore them another year, another 2 years, another 3 years would be very detrimental to the students of this school district.
So to answer the comment on the premium. So typically what happens is when we get a bond, say, keep it easy, $100,000, we will actually net about $990,000. Part of that is costs and expenses in doing the bond. The other one is what is called a discount. In this case, with this bond, because of the way it's being structured and the amount, this one is going to be receiving a premium. So just giving you estimates, because obviously I'm going to need the final numbers to give you real true numbers. But the projection right now would be we would borrow and repay $16.7 million and receive $18 million in cash, with that $1.3 million being part of the premium associated with this bond.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions on this item before we vote? Okay, seeing none, we'll go in alphabetical order again. Ms. Cancro?
Yes.
Ms. Drummond?
Yes.
Ms. Hull?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Navarrete?
Yes.
Ms. Purdue?
No.
Ms. Reese?
Yes.
Mr. Winters?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. So that's 8-1, and the motion carries. All right, with that, we'll move on to the transportation contract. Can I have a motion to approve the Fourth Amendment to the first student contract as attached? Mr. McGinnis, and a second. I'll make a second. Any comments from the board?
One question. So I spoke to another district that has their buses outsourced and with a different company. And in that contract, their contract is written a little differently. It says they needed to pay their bus service for 180 days. That's what's in their contract. And of course, the comment was made, once now that we've had a pandemic for the first time in most of our lifetimes, that people will be changing their contracts, you know, to put out 180 days. And I believe our contract, that was not written, but something else similar might have been written. So I said to this person, well, did they furlough their workers or not? And the person said, oh, I never thought to ask. So he said that would really change things. So I do believe, and I know we talked about this last week, I was quiet on this subject because I was too busy focused on education, and I was letting the finance people talk about this, and you guys were doing a great job. I realize that we need to pay first students something. I realize that. I still don't understand that amount. I mean, I know even if you furlough your workers, you're paying for, you know, unemployment insurance, you know, there's things you have to pay for. But I still am unsure of how we came to that amount. And I know it's been discussed, but it's such an important topic, it's worth discussing again. So if Mr. Bricker or Dr. Zerby want to step in there.
Sure. So initially the numbers when we were talking with first student for the first 2 weeks was 87.5% of the routes that were planned. Initially everyone thought this was just going to be a 2-week situation. Clearly that changed, and what we did is we re-looked and reevaluated that. And part of coming up to the information was one to make sure the first student is not profiting from what we are doing and any decisions that we are making. That would be first and foremost. Second would be to make sure that the staff is protected and covered. And then, you know, to make sure what we're paying for, if anything else is paying for, is reasonable. As part of the negotiations with first student, they came to us and were asking us to pay 90 to 94%, which would eliminate their profits. But we had already had 87.5 as the initial discussion. I said, there's no way I'm going up from there. They then went back, sat down, and went over the union. And the union and first student came up with the fact that it's better off if they just furloughed the drivers at this point in time. And as such, then obviously I'm not going to be paying them 87.5 cents on the dollar. That's just not reasonable. So what we had them do is give us what would be your cost to cover the operationals. 50% was the number that came out. And listening to the different school districts, same as you did around the area, we have a business directors meeting. We have different conversations. Short of 2 other school districts, we're the lowest. There's only 2 school districts that are currently lower than us, and they're not paying first student anything. We'll state at this point in time. They're still subject to change. They could go in. Part of the Act 13 that allows us to pay them is we then will receive the subsidy to offset these costs. So the amount that we pay first student will come into the subsidy calculation. So while the gross number associated with the routes would be, say, $600-some thousand, and all in about $788,000, there's an offset to next year's income, and that's the subsidy. So when we went and did that, we came up with 50. Subsequent to that, to the request of the board, I went out and I had asked and provided the board with the numbers that were provided to me by first student for their cost breaking down percentage. Driver compensation was 44.81%. Profit is 5.57%. Fixed costs are 13.92%. Insurance 6.25%. The buses 14.74%, and maintenance costs 14.71%. It comes into about 49.62%, give or take. One of the things first students also going to be doing is they're going to be covering the employees' healthcare insurance at this point in time, which we would be obligated to pay our portion of the former Methacton drivers' healthcare insurance, and that's factored into the total number that was provided. So, and that also includes routing, the total number, just to be clear, that's a separate contract. So it seemed that the 50 seems like a pretty good and pretty fair number based on that. This allows them to continue to do the maintenance on the vehicles, as well as acquire the new vehicles should they be needed for our school district. As part of the subsidy, we cannot have a vehicle over 10 years in age, so anything that's over 10 years in age has to be replaced, which will require a new bus for the aging fleet. So that is how we came up to the number. I would say that the rest of the school districts that are paying, once you get into this, they're at the 80s or higher. One other school district is matching us at 50. Oddly enough, they had this written into their contract to only pay 50% as part of their analysis. I would say that school district's pretty astute in looking at their books and would know what their true numbers should be. And that's how we came up to the numbers that we're dealing with today.
Thank you for summarizing that. I know you've done it before, but I really needed to hear it one more time. I appreciate that.
Tim, I have one question for you. In looking at the contract, we have in here that they will provide a weekly documentation starting April 13th. Have we received any documentation? Or is that date going to change after this, the board votes?
We don't have an amendment that's agreed upon and signed, so they really can't provide us with anything. They could go back and do that. We'll also state as part of this contract, the change in the damages to first student. So it's $100 if they're unable to run routes, which are currently or $50 if they're unable to run routes, which we have levied against first student at certain times. But what we do to work with them, given the situation of the drivers, is we outsource certain routes to third-party vendors, and we don't charge them for the outsourcing of those routes. For not being able to run routes, for being late, yes, we do charge them, and it does come off their bill. But if they can't run a route, say, to school X because it's so far away, and we need that bus to get the more reasonably local areas in, and there's only 2 kids on that bus, and I can't send a 72-passenger bus 3 hours away with 2 students, we will outsource those. Part of what is written into this agreement is that if we do that, first student will have to pay for the cost of that route. So we will deduct that from them. I just want to make sure that that's known in there. Other comment with regards to our mark once was made that they're not paying them. They're not covered, just so everyone's clear, under Act 13. So we have no rights to pay their staff. And that would come out of the food service account. We are paying their manager, who is actually still working as he's working with the backpack program and in the process of closing down the schools. But he's the only staff member we pay because he's actually working for us.
So Tim, I had a question. With the subsidy, you said with the Act 13, we're looking at the $780,000, but we have a subsidy later on. Are you saying we're going to get a certain amount of money back next year for what we're paying them now?
Our subsidy this year was $2 million, roughly.
Oh. And you also said that there was a 5.5% profit when you did the breakdown just now. Is that correct? When you said the 44 comp, 5.5 profit?
The number provided to us was 5.75% is their profit line.
And I thought they were going to remove their profit, I guess.
That's not included in the 50% that we are paying them. That is removed from what we're paying them. So once all the items we're paying for is 49.62% plus not knowing what portion would make up the insurance that they're paying on behalf of their employees and carrying that insurance through. So that number would round us at 50% or maybe a little bit higher. And I'll be the first to say I'm not in the position to say you pay someone for something that's not being done, but the maintenance is on the bus and the replacement of the buses and the insurance on the buses are things that are still being carried whether we run the routes or not.
I know it's a hard vote, to be honest, on my end.
I'm not a fan of it, believe me.
I'm not. It's just something, I understand we're still responsible for it, but there's nothing happening. We're in a shutdown.
But the buses are still being repaired. The buses still require maintenance. The buses still require insurance, and the buses still require to be replaced. And that's all I'm asking to be covered for under this amendment.
But I'm just throwing it out there. Are they being maintenance and replaced now? They're going to be maintenance and replaced when we're back in operation. In my opinion, I feel like we're in a freeze. All those things will happen when we begin again. Like,
Their staff is in there now, currently working on the buses.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yeah, there's a couple things that, it make it sound like, as Tim just said, that we're paying them for nothing. And that's not true. As Tim just said very eloquently, that we are paying them for the upkeep of their buses that we will use again. So what else is not out there? And for full disclosure, one of the school districts that said, we're not paying you a dime, basically got a cease and desist letter from First Student that says, well, come September, we may not be there for you. So while this is an expense for us, we also have to look at it as a business continuation expense for us, because we need First Student come September, all else being equal, that we're back in September. I've said this to a couple of you guys. If there's a group of parents and kids waiting for a bus on the first day of school that's not coming, the conversation that day between the parents will not be, wasn't it great that our school district, our directors stood up to First Student? That's not going to be the conversation. We need buses. And now to get all economic professor, I'll put my economic professor hat on. We're in a regional oligopoly, right? Which means there are very few vendors to many customers. First Student's the only game in town for us, guys. All these smaller mom and pops that have one school district, that have two, they may not make this. And guess who's going to buy those companies? First Student. So we can sit here and say we're paying them for nothing. That's not accurate. Do I wish that they would say, hey, magically we're going to take all of this on our side of the plate? That's just not real world. And many businesses have to do this right now. And back to what Paul alluded to, what I said earlier, they're hoarding capital. They're putting their arms around everything they can get. And contractually, they're allowed to do this. And contractually, they're allowed to void the contract. And there's a local school district that may not have First Student come September. And again, that's a really, really bad situation for us to put ourselves in. This is a business continuation decision to upgrade the buses that we will eventually be using again. So it is not something for nothing. And the liquidated damages clause in this, there's historical data of what we pay for those missed bus runs. We don't have that risk on our balance sheet anymore. That's being taken over by First Student. So this is a negotiated settlement. This isn't them coming in here and saying, you know what, this is the way it is, take it or leave it. My fear is if we go any further, hey, you know what, let's not say, let's try and get 40%, let's get 30%, that they pull out that hammer and they smack us on the head with it. And they say, you know what, come September, we may not be able to service you. That is a disaster. And that will be on our hands. And unfortunately, we have a way to mitigate that risk right now. Is this great? No, but that's the price of poker right now. And I think we have to make sure that we are looking long-term through this and not being a penny wise and a pound foolish, that we have to make sure that when we all return to normalcy, which we cannot all wait for, that we have buses to pick up our kids. Thank you.
I think it's also important to note that it's a little bit of a case of a glass half full, glass half empty, because on the flip side, there are districts who are paying 100% on their contracts. So I appreciate the fact that we've been able to negotiate this amendment, and that the amendment does give us some sort of option or opportunity for recouping some of these costs later on down the road. So we've already budgeted this expense. This was already money that was already out the door as far as we were concerned as we were operating. So I understand that the whole idea of we're paying for transportation that we are not providing to families, we're not getting right now, but I agree with what Mr. McGinnis is saying. This is about an ongoing business relationship that we need to preserve and work with our partner to make sure that we have an ongoing relationship there.
I just have
Mr. Navarrete. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Samira, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just have one comment, and I agree. I don't want us to be in a position come September where we have issues with the buses, because we'll hear more about that than saving the district money this time around. But I think what I struggle with is the 50%. And I think, Kim, you mentioned that there was negotiations down to get it down to 50%. I've never heard that. And it seemed like 50% was the number that was put out there by First Student. And that's what we're settling for. And and then maybe I wasn't in on those discussions, and I'm sure more happened on the other end than what we're provided. But it seemed like 50% is the number that was provided out front, and that's where we are still at. So I don't know what negotiations were made to get us anything else. When we mentioned there are other districts that are paying 100%, did we start at 100%, we ended up at 50%, or did we even negotiate the 50%?
We started at, they started at 95. We went to 80, we agreed for the first 2 weeks at 87.5. It was more because it was just supposed to be a 2-week stay, as I mentioned before. Once with that looked to a long term, they had asked back up to 95, retaining the drivers. I said, well, there's no way, again, we're not going to go back up. We're going to stay where we are at best case scenario. And I need to understand what we're going to be paying for and what the drivers would be doing and how we would make that. And then they talked to their union, came up with, let's pull the drivers out. They said, where do you think it should be? We talked about the different numbers of what they need to do, the cost, we boiled it down, and we ended up on the 50%. And that was after my conversations with other business managers as to where they are going, what they're looking at, information I obtained from those other business managers on what they anticipate the costs are from their vendors. Most of them being, as Mr. McGinnis pointed out, almost all of them are First Student with the exception of maybe 2 or 3. So that is how we got down to the 50. They did not come to us and say we want 50. If they had it their way, they want 95%. And I'm pretty sure they would then have the drivers back on and be paying them. But that would also be beneficial for them and not as beneficial for us.
Mr. Navarrete, I know you've been waiting to jump in. Go ahead.
There's a lot of good points here, and Drew's point about risk management here is this is the essential question, right? Is where, you know, each of us have to decide in this case how much risk we're willing to tolerate and what our read of this situation is. I don't have as much of a doomsday look on it as Drew does, and I'm certainly not trying to get this to zero, because I don't think that's fair either. Because at the end of the day, right, we're one of the few entities that's still operating that has cash, and they need our cash. Let's be frank. I think if we take a critical eye towards the figures that they shared with us, I think we look at it and say that, you know, a profit percentage of 5.5% is ludicrously small. This is a $2.6 billion corporation. They're a subsidiary of a 7 or 8 billion pound corporation out of the UK. First Student itself, in their own in First Group's annual reports an operating income of 9.5%. When they, our so-called partner, threw us a letter in the mail in December of 2018 to tell us that they were going to cancel our contract, we gave them a price increase, and they got 10% on that price increase. Now, a price increase goes straight to their bottom line. We're foolish if we think they're only making 5% off of this. Okay, I played this game myself. You hide the cost. It's quote unquote fixed cost. Fixed cost is a lot of their overhead, which is built into their profit number that then goes up the chain. My goal here is, as much as anything, is to keep as many people employed as we can, right? Their site manager, mechanics. Let's be real about mechanics and what the maintenance is happening that's on these buses. These buses are not in service. They are sitting in a yard right now. There is not a lot of maintenance that's going on. But I get it, right? We have, you know, we're finding work for a lot of employees in our own district that's not their normal work. So I want to know what the costs are. How much are they paying for those mechanics? I agree. We've got insurance costs. Let's keep the insurance costs. I want to know more details about the transportation subsidy and how it's impacted by our decision whether or not we buy a bus next year. Let's say we decide let's forego that. You know, they're asking for 15% on depreciation. depreciation is a paper expense. It's not cash outflow. This is something that's obviously planned into it. That doesn't affect their cash outflows today. So, I'm not looking to get to zero, but I think 50% is far too high of a number to be fair for what their actual expenses are today and what they're paying their people. And I asked last week for a sit down with those guys. I remember the audience even asked them to come into this meeting, and they threw us numbers that I'm sure that they share the same numbers with everybody else. Frankly, I don't believe them. And I would like them to come in and show us what their costs are for the people that they're actually employing today. What are their actual maintenance costs today? What are the actual insurance costs? And let's pay those expenses. Let's not pay the money that goes back to the UK for their overhead in their operation. Let's pay for the money that's going to stay here in our community with our people and keep our local community employed. So I'm going to make a motion that we table this discussion pending a negotiation with First Student, with members of this board to get to a lower number. My number in my head is probably no more than 25%.
Okay, there's a motion to table. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Was that you, Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Okay, so Ms. Hall has made a second. So now we have to take a vote. So all those in favor of tabling, and I think we're going to have to do this as a roll call because I don't anticipate this being necessarily unanimous. So all those in favor of tabling, let's start with you, Ms. Cancro.
Yes.
Ms. Drummond?
Yes.
Ms. Hull?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
No.
Mr. Navarrete?
Yes.
Ms. Purdue?
Yes.
Ms. Reese?
No.
Mr. Winters? Sorry, say that again, Mr. Winters.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay. And for myself, I'm voting no. So with a vote of 6-3, the motion to table this carries. At this point, I don't know that it's appropriate for us to continue then conversation, Mr. Summers, is that correct? The motion's been tabled.
That's right, I would move on with the agenda.
Okay. Moving on to master plan projects. We need to may I have a motion to authorize the administration to issue notice of permission to resume construction activities?
I'll make the motion.
Ms. Hull, and a second?
Miss Reese seconds.
Okay. Any comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Personnel items, Mr. Regina, you're up.
Good evening, everyone. We have a number of items for the board's approval this evening. We have 3 items under professional resignations. Each of those are for resignations for retirement. We have 1 position, 1 item for administrative employment for Robert Jones for Director of Facilities. We have 1 item for professional uncompensated leave. And we have 1 item for sabbatical leave, which is a compensated professional leave, which is for educational purposes. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone want to take any of these personnel items separately? All right, then I will take a motion to approve all personnel items.
I make a motion.
Ms. Reese, and a second?
Second, Ms. Drummond.
Thank you, Ms. Drummond. Any comments from the board?
One, I don't know how many. Mr. Regina, you had mentioned at the work session that you thought there would be another retirement. 1 has been added. Any more buzz? And it's unusual that we have to do this only because a lot of districts, this passed. And you have to give a certain amount of time. But so this is weird that I'm asking this, but have you heard any other? And I'm asking because it's a big deal.
Yes, we've heard of a couple others that have inquired, and some have had set up meetings with PEASers to try to get an understanding, or with their financial reps to get an understanding what that would look like for them. But we haven't received anything else in writing quite yet.
And then my other question has to do with facilities director. Because that's a different type of position than, we typically hire in education, is there ever a caveat in a contract, like a temporary trial period, or I should say, or is there anything ever like that? And not because I expect there to be a problem, but when you're hiring such a big deal in this time, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with administrative positions, there are interim or acting positions that have taken place. The district obviously has done some of those in the future, but typically once you open it up to bring somebody in that's employed with another entity, the likelihood of us being able to attract talent that way we obviously wouldn't be very successful. So unfortunately, that's good to do sometimes internally, but going externally, it makes it a little more difficult.
I just wanted to say a little bit about the process of hiring Mr. Jones. We have an approved job description, obviously, because that was what we used to advertise this position. Correct, Mr. Regina?
That is correct.
Okay, and we went through several rounds of interviews. We had well over 100 candidates for this position. I know I participated in some, Mr. Navarrete, and I believe Mr. Navarrete, Ms. Cancro, Ms. Drummond, Mr. McGinnis. I know that several of the board members had a chance to interview Mr. Jones at one time or another. So I think that we're all pretty confident that we landed on the right candidate here, and that we've followed a good hiring process. So I just wanted to point that out there. Are there any other comments from the board on personnel items? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the personnel items as listed?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries 9-0. Curriculum and programs, Dr. Katona.
Thank you. For your approval, we have the textbook adoption. These resources were made available. We did not have anyone, we did have a system set up, but we did not have anyone come in to review any of them. But we're seeking approval for these textbooks and online resources as presented here for the grade levels and quantities. And we also have the Arcola Intermediate School Program change to approve and concur in the recommendation of the superintendent to curtail or alter the educational program as described in the attachment pursuant to section 1124A2 of the Public School Code by eliminating 2 family consumer science teaching positions and 1 health PE teaching position at Arcola Intermediate School effective July 1st, 2020. Further, the superintendent is directed to notify the Pennsylvania Department of Education of the curtailment or alteration in accordance with section 1124B of the Public School Code.
Thank you, Dr. Katona. Can I have a motion to approve the textbook adoption? Ms. Reese, and a second, Ms. Purdue. Do I have any comments from the board on the textbooks? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion carries 9-0. And now may I have a motion to approve the Arcola Intermediate School Program changes listed on the agenda?
I motion.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cancro. And a second?
Second.
Mr. Winters. Comments from the board?
As I stated last week, I will in no way approve this. We might very well be able to eliminate three positions. Maybe there's family consumer science at the high school or PE at the high school that can be moved. So it's not the positions necessarily. It is that I specifically asked and was very vehement twice during the work session and in writing that this is not thought out fully yet. I don't want to hear budget. We still have another 6, 7, 8 weeks. It's not that some of the changes aren't good or whatever. They are not fully tweaked, and that's not Dr. Mangano's fault or Dr. Zerbe's fault or Dr. Katona's fault. It was supposed to be brought to the Ed Committee. We know these are difficult times, and it was not. Then there was almost a week to make tweaks, and I was told, nope, staying as is. Oh, we can maybe add some PE, but we'll have to see. And there's so much we need to talk about. Some of the ideas are good. Some of the ideas are not good. There are many logistical nightmares with this, but we have another 30 days at least to figure it out. And I am a vehement no for the 10 millionth time. And this board is phenomenal. And we have so much on our plates right now. We have so much on our plates personally, on this board, in our work lives. And I know not everyone got a chance to really fully think about it. And some of you I really have never, this is the second time I've ever felt as strongly about anything.
Well, I don't think that it's fair to say that we haven't had time to fully think about it. But I do want to.
I was, just so you know, I was complimenting you. What I meant was there wasn't it wasn't an insult to anybody.
Now, I understand that. I think that it's worth noting that this is not an economically driven item here. So this is an opportunity to look at ways that we can restructure the educational offerings at our COLA. That being said, I agree with a lot of the sentiments that I'm hearing from the community that I've heard from other board members in the past week. So trust me, this has been top of mind for all 9 of us on this board. I have every person to a single one has reached out. I've heard from everybody and in lots of individual conversations. So I understand that there is, we have concerns. There's concerns about the PE. There's concerns about the way that world languages would be in the curriculum. There's concerns about the need for ELA. There's a lot of concerns. So rather than try to sum up what has been shared with me throughout the week, I'm going to leave that to the other board members. I see Mr. McGinnis, you want to speak, so please go right ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm as vehement as Andrea on this, but I agree with the 2 speakers regarding the phys ed. Listen, it's my bias as athletic coaching in my background, but to have PE as phys ed for only 1 quarter for kids this age, I don't think it's good for them. And more importantly, I think it runs contrary to what we're trying to build with the whole student model that we've been going with. So in its current form, I would be voting no against it.
Ms. Purdue.
And I think along those same lines, when we look at what we have with the presentation last week or earlier this week on full day kindergarten, the emphasis, like some of it was placed on physical education as far as like the kids having to get a certain amount of activity per day. And with me, what I like to see is consistency. And in looking at the program or the curriculum change as it's provided, we're not being consistent across our district if we change it. And I struggle a little bit with the language also, because I know I was in a program where I went and did a language from, I think, an every other day perspective, and it don't work out because it's hard to retain. You come back the next time and it's like starting over right from where you picked up, where you left off at. So I think there's a lot of things that need to be worked out. A little bit of what I struggle with is if I'm going according to being on this board, the order in which we do things is that it should have came to the education committee first, where we review, bring up our issues and concerns, and then it kind of get worked out before it gets to the board. I don't think this came on in that same level as how we usually bring things up. And I think for that, that's why a lot of people feel like it was rushed. I don't think it wasn't well thought out. I think the plan there's some parts of it that are good, but there's also some plans that need to be worked out.
Thank you, Ms. Purdue. Ms. Drummond?
Yeah, I also have a lot of concerns about this change in programming. One concern I have is about the gifted programming, and if you're allowing gifted students to opt out of these expressive arts periods, then they could opt out of their physical education, and the gifted students could miss their entire physical education opportunity. I also wonder if the reading is necessary for every child or some targeted students for enrichment. And I do have a lot of concerns about the continuity of education with the world language, because I think that when you're introducing that, doing the every other day is really not ideal way to deliver the world language programming. So I have also a lot of concerns, and would also like to see maybe the physical education spared or done differently, and somehow integrate the gifted programming, because we're supposed to be looking as a district at the gifted education and re-looking at the program, and I would like to see that addressed in this programming change. Thank you.
Mr. Navarrete?
Yeah, I just first I want to say thank you to all the parents and teachers and community members that have reached out over the course of the last week. I know I've talked to a bunch of you, especially in the last couple of days, to hear your concerns and share mine. There's a couple of issues here that I have, and listen, I understand the need to reformulate our programs at times, and certainly the retirement of 2 teachers in the same department presents an opportunity for us to make a change that then doesn't have an impact on other staff members, right? This the reduction through attrition, right? We've done that in other times in the past. While I don't particularly like that, especially in the context of everything that we said earlier tonight about the career readiness programs, and the fact that FCS is one more thing that I guess adds to that. We're going to have to make a lot of tough decisions here, and I think ultimately I could get behind that part of it, although reluctantly. But I think as a board, we've done a very good job of weighing the impacts of the changes that we vote for in these difficult decisions and seeing how they affect everybody and coming to that balance. I think there's a lot of diversity of opinion on this board, and we're all willing to hear each other. And I think that's been really great, and we've made the right fiscally responsible decisions in the interest of the entire district and community. But I think this plan falls short of that in its current form. I'll be frank, and I know I said this last week, cutting physical education in half is flat unacceptable, and it's a non-starter for me. I know you guys know, but for everybody that's listening, this morning I shared a study with the rest of the board, and that was published just 2 months ago in the Lancet Child and Adolescent Health Journal, that associated declining physical activity at ages 12, 14, and 16 with increased depressive symptoms at 18. So we cannot, in one breath, propose modifying our health curriculum for an increased focus on mental health, and then in the next breath, take away the very physical activity that helps maintain that health. We are literally teaching our children exactly how their teachers and administrators are failing them. Think about that. Where world language is concerned, I have concerns about that. I share a lot of what's already been said. This every other day model, it's been rejected by other districts because of the lack of continuity, the lack of rigor. The fact that model, I'd like to thank the world language teachers that put together a nice summary of their concerns and shared them with us. There's an additional $30,000 in cost that gets added to the budget. for additional textbooks and textbook licenses because we've now got to spread this out over 2 grades. Quite frankly, the lack of a plan for how we're going to address the support of our current 7th graders as they move into 8th grade, and they take only a half of the year of Spanish or German or French before moving on to high school, that needs more work. Like what happens to those kids? When they go to high school, they're going to have what, a level 1.5 class? Are they going to be going to a level 2 class with sophomores that just had Spanish 1 last year? I don't see a good plan for that right now, and I'm not going to be able to support it. I think we set those kids back when we do that. It may cause scheduling difficulties, but I'd really like us to strongly consider how we give those kids the full experience that they've expected in giving them a full year of a world language before they go to high school. There's also the justification for the whole thing relative to the ELA program. You know, we talked about PSSA scores, but the data that was presented was a snapshot of the data, and it showed a decline in the grade 8 scores. But if you go back and look at the data Dr. Katona presented in the last couple of years, in the 2019 data, so the same data that Amy shared with us the other day, every grade but 1 was down about 5 points on the PSSA ELAs. 5 points. Now, I'm not one to say we should be teaching to the test, and I don't agree with that, but this is not an 8th grade issue. That is more indicative of a systemic issue in how we deliver our curriculum. The final point I'll add to this is, and I brought this up at the end last week, we are proposing adding an ELA class to 8th grade. So we're adding another core class to 8th grade. Now every 8th grade or 7th grade core teacher teaches 5 classes, right? We got 5 classes and we've got 3 teams. So 15 periods, right? The equivalent of adding 3 teachers to our books. And when we ask about how we're going to do that, we got a fairly evasive answer. Dr. Zerby, thank you for providing some of that information today, but even the information they provided points out that there are huge inefficiencies in the way that we're operating that building and the way our staff is assigned. And if this is a means of better utilizing that staff, great. Maybe we don't need that staff to begin with. Maybe the program change should be to maybe put things back to the way they were, and let's just eliminate those staff positions that truly aren't needed. So I'd like to see this go back through education. I'd like to see a better plan around that has no change to the phys ed schedule. I think the comment that I think was Mrs. Ames made about we should be the leaders and others should follow. Why do we reduce the minutes? Other districts should be increasing their minutes. I 100% agree. I'd like to see a minimum of a full year of language for the incoming 8th graders. And I'd like to see a plan for how we can still deliver this ELA instruction that's so needed. That doesn't involve adding an extra schedule and decimating of these other subject areas. You know, we've treated this 8th period, warrior win period, as a sacred cow. But the reality is we've got an 8th period that for the majority of kids is a study hall. And if they're lucky, they're doing homework. And I know there's ES support and there's LS support and there are other things that happen in that period. But to Liz's point about how we administer the gifted program, why can't that be an option? Why can't we do targeted ELA as part of that win period?
Yep. I'm sorry.
No, I've said more than enough. I'll stop.
So I just want to piggyback on that a little bit. I also want to say that I think that our intentions are good here. Our intention is to take this opportunity of the dual retirements and try to re-envision and reimagine what we're doing at Arcola and look at ways that we can change the way that we're delivering education in that building. And so I appreciate that effort. I think that what ended up happening is that due to the timing of those retirements, when we got those retirements, and then consequently the timeline for when we could develop this alternative or these options was compressed. And so I think it's just, it's one of these situations. It is what it is. There's nothing we can do about the timeline that was handed to us. However, that doesn't mean that we need to rush into a vote at this time if it's not something that the board is comfortable with. Ms. Hull, I think that you may have had your hand up earlier, and I don't want to miss out on hearing from you. Did you have something to share as well?
No, I did want to comment because I really did like this when it was first presented last week. I saw an increase in mental health supports for students at an age when I think that they really need it. And I know that she knows the school and she knows what the students need. So I really liked it on the face, but throughout the last week, I've gotten a lot of feedback from teachers, parents. I've been presented reports that have caused me to pause. And I share the same concern with the rest of the board at this point. I don't want to rush into a decision, and I think that we need to take a little bit more time on this.
So seeing all of that, I'd like to make a motion to table this item. Is there a second?
I second.
I couldn't even keep track of who was first there, so I'm going to go with Ms. Drummond on that one. So we'll take a vote. All those in favor of tabling?
Aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Okay, so it's a 9-0 vote, and we'll table this. And I think that there was a lot of good feedback given from the board here. I think that it sounds like a lot of us would like to have the opportunity to revisit this. I don't think that this was a flat out no to the idea of looking at change at Arcola. It was just a no to it in its current iteration. So I'm confident that if this goes back through the education committee, that we can get to a place where the board can look at this again at a later date. Moving on to policy, we have 6 policies for first read this evening and 10 policies that are up for a vote at second reading. So can I have a motion to approve the 10 policies listed under second reading as attached?
I make the motion.
Second.
Paul, and a second from Ms. Reese. Any comments from the board on these policies? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Gifts and donations, none, and trips, we have none. For dates for our board members' calendars, we have our regular slate of, I'm sorry.
A gift. There is a gift.
I don't have it listed on my agenda.
Oh.
Oh, you're
Okay.
showing it on the screen.
14A.
It's on the screen. It's the backpack that Ms. Krelevich shared.
Okay, I apologize. The version that I have, that's my script for the evening, does not have that on there. I forgot to make that adjustment. So let me,
Having said that, before you go on, Kim, you do an incredible job doing this. So please, I've not had a chance to tell you that. So I'm going to tell you now, you're doing a great job. So.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. Oh, now that I look at the rest of the screen, I can see it. Okay, so let's have a motion to accept a gift from the Methacton Education Foundation to be used for the backpack program in an amount of $5,000.
I make a motion.
Ms. Reese, and a second, Mr. McGinnis. Any comments from the board?
Thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
And on the board.
Thank you to the Education Foundation.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Of course not. All right, 9-0. Now moving on to dates for board members' calendars. We have our regular slate of meetings. They will all be held virtually. We do have a special board meeting for the proposed final budget adoption on May 19th. That's going to be in conjunction with our work session, and then our regular voting meeting on the 26th. Does anyone have anything for old business this evening?
I just wanted to say one thing if I can. Yeah, I just wanted to, we had a big discussion last week about the virtual learning, and I just wanted to thank all of the administration and the teachers for taking everybody's feedback and really implementing such wonderful things moving forward in the virtual learning environment. I've seen a huge step forward in growth. I think it's growth for the principals to reach out and provide further explanation that the people were looking for, explaining what equity is to all students in their letters. I found that really a genuine statement. Principals were encouraging parents to really reach out to the teachers on comments, on content, on assignments, and that didn't always just mean the negatives, but more if they were searching for more. So it was both, having the parents know that teachers are available and reach out to them and they could provide whatever that child needs. And I do feel like it's been great. I feel like the format from K to 4 for the students has been a very easy flowing format where it's allowed the students to be a little bit more independent and not needing the parent engagement to require each assessment. So you knew what the asynchronous skill they were working on and the homework that would follow to work on that skill. I thought it was very well done. And I think seeing a lot more voices on pre-recorded things, lessons, a lot of people recording themselves, setting up virtual meetings, I think was definitely has been started. So I just thank you because I know this has been a growing forward in this virtual learning environment. And I thank you for all the work that you guys are doing and I appreciate all the feedback. And I really, really enjoyed the video that came out today. I think I received so many positive feedback to see all the administrators' faces in their own element with their own different music background and style and their own words to encourage everyone that we are one as Methacton. So thank you. I think you guys have really are stepping up to the plate and we're still going to grow and further excel in this new environment. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that, Ms. Cancro. And speaking as a parent of a senior, I really appreciated the gesture on behalf of the PAC to light up the scoreboard last week and the video that came out with that. I'm not going to tell you how many tissues I went through watching that video, but it was a lot. And I appreciate all the planning that is going into the end of the year for the seniors. It's not going to be what we had all expected when we started this year, but it's going to be something special. So thank you. Is there anyone else with comments for old business?
Yes, I have one comment. If you recall back, I can't recall exactly which meeting. It might have been the meeting at the end of March, where there was discussion about the challenges associated with Act 13 and the payment of supplemental contracts with regards to spring coaches that may have only actually put in 2 to 3 days of the season prior to schools being closed. And there was discussion among the members of the board that there was a lot of concern about paying these folks for not necessarily completing or even partially or substantially completing a lot of their work, where in other instances, we have other supplemental contracts that, had 75% of their work already done. And under this Act 13 challenge, we had reached out to our solicitor who's here this evening, and he can certainly weigh in on the matter, but it's from his legal opinion that because the board approved these positions and because they started in that work, and because Act 13 has certain provisions that say we need to pay them, it is from his legal review and the recommendation of the administration that we pay them. So I'm not asking for your vote this evening on whether to do that. I just want to know whether or not before we proceed with that process, we don't have any major objection, because you will see that on a list of bills. And I just wanted to open that up for a discussion if anybody had any issue at this moment in time with the administration proceeding on that. Anyone else? Anyone? Okay, we're going to move forward. Yeah, we're going to move forward with the matter then.
Okay, anyone else with old business? How about new business? All right, so at this time, we will take courtesy of the floor. So this is a time for the residents to provide comments on matters that could come before the Board of Directors. The board asks again that you keep your comments to 4 minutes or less. We may choose to respond to some matters following conclusion of courtesy of the floor, but much like the public comment in the beginning, it's not a question and answer time. So feel free to ask any questions that you like, but that you will not be getting an immediate response or an answer to those questions. So please bear that in mind. I will go down the list of people who had pre-registered to speak during courtesy of the floor. And if you are still hanging in there with us, if you could just push the button to raise your hand. I have Amna Khan, Jim Malik, Maria Teresa Darpa, Amanda, Jitendra Kunar, Malik Staton, Nikki Sloan, Christina Ladsko, Mike Ryan.
I think Kim just dropped off the meeting. There she is. There she is.
No, I'm still here. Sorry, when someone raises their hand, they go to the top of the list and I scrolled up and now he's not there. So just bear with me for a second. There we go, Mr. Ryan, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Michael Ryan, Lower Providence. As always, thank you to all of you for all that you do for our students and the community. Really is greatly appreciated. So very good, thorough conversations this evening around the bond resolutions, the transportation, and the art cult programming. As a member of the community, going to agree on certain things, we're going to disagree on others, but this is why you're elected. You know, we trust in your ability and to make the proper decisions. So I just want to say thank you, and I just wanted to leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Mr. Earnshaw. Okay, Mr. Earnshaw, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Brian Earnshaw, Lower Providence. First, thanks to Ms. Perdue, Ms. Reese, and Mr. Winters for your votes against certain of the bond resolutions. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Navarrete for leading the charge on tabling the first student matter. I think that was the right thing to do, especially given the need to get more information. During this conversation, I was somewhat concerned by some of the comments from the Finance Committee chair. Things like needing to hoard cash, some of the comments about first student and essentially giving in to their demands despite an existing contract, and bonds are simply an IOU. Some of those comments need to be thought about, especially with respect to understanding where the district's funding comes from, and that being taxpayers, whether it's federal, state, or local funding. Going back to Mr. Bricker's presentation, break it down into 3 components as he presented. The 18-19 surplus review. I would hope the board that would, at the end of this fiscal year, make sure that this analysis is presented sooner than 10 months after year end. That this should have been done back in October, November of last year. I think it's also important to note that the actual operating surplus is $3 million, not the 1.8 presented by Mr. Bricker. Netted against his numbers is 1.2 million transferred to capital. So when you look at a true operating surplus, it's $3 million for that 18-19 year. The year before that was 2.6 million, and the year preceding that was 1.1 million. So over the last 3 years, you've got close to $7 million in operating surpluses in the budget. I think that needs to be thought about and evaluate whether or not there are structural deficiencies in the budget preparation process. Equally concerning is that the bulk of the variance came on the expense side came from salaries and benefits. This should be very predictable. The board should demand a schedule of salaries by person and related benefits costs, and that should tie to the total in the budget. This concern is equally shown by the fact that the 1920 forecast of the favorable variance, $1.8 million, is again related to salaries and benefits. I agree with Mr. Winters that the surplus will likely be a higher number. I think some of the revenue estimates are conservative and are assuming worst case, and even if the money's not collected, it likely eventually will, and Mr. Bricker should be instructed to book accruals for those revenues. Turning to the 2021 budget, I mostly have questions. One is the board going to be provided with a comparison of the forecast Mr. Bricker put together against the budget for the next fiscal year? Comparing budget to budget is fine if you meet your budget. When you're throwing off surpluses, comparing one budget to the next is a meaningless comparison. There was no discussion about the MEA contract assumptions in next year's budget. I think that's obviously a very significant component. I presume the athletic director which is a new position, is still in the budget. That should be questioned and reviewed. Also, no discussion of how much of the financing and whether that $18 million borrowing is in the budget for next year. There's been a lot of talk over the past few years about possible reductions in staffing in the high school. How were those evaluated in the budget? And again, same as the forecast, I think that the revenue assumptions are too conservative in the budget. Not knowing what's going to happen, I was going to take some conservative position, but going to the worst case is probably too extreme. And there was a lot of discussion about going to 0%. So there's a lot of things the board needs to think about and consider, especially with things like delaying Arrowhead, which is a significant cost, both not only on the financing side, but in the preparation costs with the KCBA architect costs. And there's also on the surplus side from the current fiscal year, there needs to be more discussions about what's going to happen with that surplus. And also finally, I'm hoping that the presentation Mr. Bricker gave tonight could be posted to the website so that it could be reviewed further. And that is it. And thank you.
It's almost like you timed that, Mr. Earnshaw.
I try.
All right. Joyce Chambers. Nicholas Preet. Sarah Zinar. Georgianne Garini. I see a Georgianne. Georgianne, I have you in the meeting now. You can unmute and talk whenever you're ready. Okay. Kristen Sherman. And Joe Bickelman. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Bickelman, you're in the room.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Mr. Winters for his comments to Mr. McGinnis regarding our need to hoard cash and the bubble and everything related to all that borrowing. There's no bubble in our debt. We weren't fretting any bubble in the debt. They were all even payments. We had our share of wraparound debt. It was $9 million, $10 million, but it was level. The debt was level. There was no bubble. The bubble was created by the borrowing that is anticipated for a new Arrowhead that we don't need. I'm all for raising debt for necessary items, but you don't need a new Arrowhead because you have an Arcola that's 50% used. So it was totally inappropriate to say that we were fretting about a new bubble. You know, there's millage rates that are already in place to handle our debt, and it's a level debt payment over the years. So the scare tactics there weren't appreciated. The other thing I'd like to address also is the presentation by Mr. Bricker. who said that there was a $1.8 million surplus in the 18-19 school year. And he gave an explanation for that 1.8 million, but the true surplus, as Mr. Earnshaw said, was $3 million. Exactly, it's $2,978,804 is the true surplus, because we transferred $1,178,804 to the capital reserve fund. So the true surplus for that operating year, 18-19, is 2.9 million. I know Mr. Bricker, he would have presented it that way, but he was told not to present it that way, okay? But I know he wouldn't have left out the capital reserve transfer of $1.2 million on his own accord unless he was told to. So that's even more of an issue, to not present it the way it is, okay? That's something that bothers me, because, you know, that's just deceiving people. It's deceiving the public. The $287,000 surplus in salaries that he said was mostly related to overtime because of the no snowstorms, okay? You know, that's 15 employees working 425 hours each at a $45 overtime rate. You know, that's a lot of shoveling. Okay, that's 10 weeks for 15 people working on shoveling. But you need to dig into that number there and get that overhead number down, as you have to get a lot of fat out of the budget. The other item I have, it has to do with Arrowhead. I don't think you need a new Arrowhead. You have an Arcola school that has 760 kids in it. It has a functional capacity, according to Dr. Zerby, of 1,350 kids. It's 50% utilized. You need to close Arrowhead. You need to change the grade structure to kindergarten to 5 for the remaining 4 buildings. It'll save $35 million in construction costs, $15 million in debt interest, $1 million in general fund operating, and nearly $1 million in debt refinancing for those 13 and 2016 bonds that you approved tonight. And the current grade structure, if K to 4, 5 to 6, 7 to 8 isn't working out, you can probably get better results with the K through 5 buildings. The KCB architect, his presentation says that you're building a gym at the proposed new Arrowhead that is over twice as large as the current Arrowhead gym that was built for kindergarten to 5, but you're going to build one over 2 times bigger for kindergarten to 4. And then you're going to have a separate cafeteria. The current
Thank you, Mr. Bickelman.
Arrowhead has a gym.
Thank you, Mr. Bickelman. Next, I have Michael Caffrey. And finally, John Andrews. Go ahead, Mr. Andrews.
Thank you, Ms. Larsenese. Here we are again at courtesy of the floor. John Andrews of Lower Providence. Last week on the 24th, I provided the board with a new anti-Arrowhead document. Another ranking hit at Methacton, which will be posted to Facebook later today. The high school ranking in Pennsylvania for Methacton, 6 years ago, we were 11th. A year ago, 59th. This year, 65th. All due to the ad of Skyview in 2010. Methacton High School is one of 4 high schools in the top 100 listing, with K to 4, 5 to 6, and 7 to 8 grades set up. The 3 others rank 15th, 68th, and 99th. Let's revert to pre-Skyviews, K to 5 and 6 to 8. Rejoin 14 other schools in Southeast Pennsylvania with that setup. Their average rank is 29 with a range of 3 to 54. For well over a year, you totally ignore the facts. Instead, you want a new Arrowhead and full-day kindergarten. They are two money pits and liabilities that won't improve our education quality or ranks. The new school setup of option C for K-5 and 6 to 8 results in utilizations of under 80% in 4 of the schools and at Arcola of 85%. The Arrowhead want is unjustified. The option C need is justified educationally, financially, and efficiency-wise. Wake up or pull off the shock treatment wiring. Also, with regard to the Skyview Arcola traffic study that was presented at committee, that needs to be put online, and that's been hidden because it supports the option C. And the intent of this board is not to rely on facts, but rely on unjustified wants for that new Arrowhead with its huge gym, with its separate cafeteria, with its operating expense. All of that is unneeded for essentially flat enrollment predictions for this decade. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. That concludes our courtesy of the floor. Do I have any final comments from the board before we adjourn? Okay, I just wanted to address one tiny thing right there that Mr. Andrews had commented on, because I think it has come up before. We've, in the past, when we've had facilities reports and studies, and this traffic study would fall under that category, have not released those as public documents until they've had a chance to be vetted by the full board and accepted, because there's a whole slew of reasons behind that. But basically, until it's been accepted by the full board, we don't want that to be a public document. So there is no malicious intent here. It's simply that the board has to have a chance to review the document before it can be shared with the public. That's what we were elected to do, and that's what we will continue to do. If there's nothing else from the board, I would love a motion to adjourn. Ms. Drummond, and a second. Ms. Reese, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Pam and everybody.
Good night.